In the world of Naruto, when wind and lightning come together within one's chakra network, not to clash or fight for dominance, but instead come together, they form an amazing combination that can simultaneously pierce and slash, shred and electrocute. And along with the dual speed factor unmatched by any other Kekkei Genkai, this is swift release. And now you will see what would have changed if Naruto had this marvel. In the appropriately named What If Naruto Had Swift Release, the movie. So, we're starting this what if off by just explaining how Naruto would obtain swift release. Easy, we're going to put it into Minato's genetics. Minato would have swift release and this would be carried on to Naruto, but it won't really come into fruition until he becomes a Genin. So, we're not really going to get into anything pre-academy. We're going to skip right to when Naruto fails the Genin exams. Mitsuki would approach Naruto and would basically tell him about the scroll, which we're going to change a few things, and Naruto would accept it since he's always wanted to be a Genin. He would go to the third Hokage's office as sneakily as he could, taking something called the Scroll of Sealing. Mitsuki would have also given Naruto a place where he had to go to basically learn a jutsu from the scroll, and Naruto would hastily head there, while all the Jonin and Chunin in the village are informed that the scroll has been stolen and Naruto needs to be located. The third Hokage sits on his crystal orb looking at Naruto, wondering what he's up to. Naruto, on the other hand, would have quickly opened the scroll, and he sees it split into 7 segments. On the top of these 7 segments, which is something that I created, Naruto sees something that looks like a handprint. He'd put his hand on there and channel chakra as Mitsuki told him, and what would light up is 2 of these segments. The one with the symbol for wind and the other for the symbol for lightning. Then they would kind of warp into each other and the scroll would start to open. As the ink on the page moves around, Naruto would see Jutsu of the Swift Release. He'd also see that there aren't many, since not a lot of people in the Leaf Village history has unlocked this Kekkei Genkai. So he'd read the few jutsu that there are, with the first one him seeing being the Swift Clone, a clone which moves faster than most Genin and even Chunin can see, and then when it gets to the opponent it disperses, cutting thousands of little cuts into their body and then forcing lightning through it, basically stunning them in place for an extended period of time, also dealing damage as time goes on. He'd think this is really OP and would quickly start to learn it. He would get this cloning jutsu down, but would quickly realize that he can't really perform more than 10 at a time. So he knows that this is really chakra intensive, as I made it so that, he doesn't have to overdo it. He sees that there is a multi-clone version of it, but he'd not bother to learn this. He'd rather move on to the next jutsu, which is called enhancement. By learning how to channel both wind and lightning chakra, he would be able to enhance his body. He wouldn't think he'd be able to do this since he doesn't know enough about chakra, so he'd pull out a second paper from his jacket to write these down. He'd quickly write down the few jutsu that were in the scroll, putting it back, and when he does, he gets encountered by Mitsuki, who starts telling Naruto about his origins as the Nine-Tail, basically shocking the young Uzumaki. As this happens, Iruka would also show up, trying to defend Naruto from Mitsuki. So as time goes by, Mitsuki and Iruka would be fighting as Naruto runs away. Iruka transforming into Naruto to try and throw Mitsuki off, trying to lead him away. As Mitsuki finally finds the real Naruto, he'd throw a giant shuriken at Naruto, who would then barely be saved by basically Iruka. Iruka would jump in front of the shuriken, taking it straight to his back, coughing blood all over Naruto. Naruto would now be angry. His eyes grow into slits and his birthmark intensifies. By birthmark, it means the marks on his cheek. He would then walk forward slowly, saying, "You heard Iruka-sensei, so I'm gonna kill you," as he keeps moving forward. And Mitsuki just continues ranting like, "Oh, you're a lowly academy student. What could you really do to a high chunin when not even Iruka could do anything?" But before Mitsuki knew it, Naruto had created 10 perfect clones. "A cloning jutsu? What would this help you?" Mitsuki would say, and Naruto would reply, "No, not a cloning jutsu. As you might remember, I can't do the cloning jutsu." As they all surround Mitsuki, grabbing onto him. Now Mitsuki is worried. How can clones physically touch him? As Naruto forms the ram hand seal, and they all disperse, cutting all over Mitsuki's body, more than intended, all electrifying him. The outside of his skin is seared black from the amount of heat let off by the lightning. Naruto would say, "Swift release clone technique explosion." Iruka would be surprised and, just as in canon, would sit down to talk about him and about how he feels, how he knows how Naruto feels. He'd also say that if Naruto ever needed anything, that he'd be there. Taking off his headband, putting it around Naruto's head and saying, "Let's go get Ichiraku's." Naruto would jump up excited, helping Iruka up, as Anbu would appear. Iruka would explain the situation and they'd quickly take Mitsuki's burnt body, which is somehow still alive, back for interrogation. Naruto and Iruka, on the other hand, would enjoy some more ramen. Now that Naruto is officially a genin, a week would pass, of where he tries to learn the techniques on the scroll. The only other techniques he might be able to learn are 2 jutsu that seem pretty authentic. So these aren't necessarily swift release jutsu. These are respectively wind and lightning techniques to improve your control over the elements. These were what he was supposed to start with. One is called the lightning style lightning arc, and the other is called the wind style wind defense dome, which is basically a dome that expands, cutting your opponent so that they can't get close to you. Similar to the palm rotation, but much less efficient. Naruto would now accept it. He is finally a genin, something he never thought he could accomplish. After all, he's failed the last 3 tests. Like, 4 if you include the last one. Well, whatever. He'll work the hardest and become Hokage. He'd throw his hands up in the air, preparing to head off back to the academy. He'd arrive at the academy to be stared at by all the students, thinking that he had failed. One specific student, Sasuke, would say, "I thought you failed, so where'd you steal that headband from?" Naruto would get worked up, but before he could say anything, Iruka would enter behind him, saying, "Naruto passed a secondary test, so he didn't steal it from anyone, Sasuke. Now mind your manners. And Naruto, take a seat." As this happens, the teams will be announced until eventually until we get to Team 7. Sasuke Uchiha. In her head, Sakura hopes to be on this team, while Naruto hopes not to. Sakura Haruno, Iruka would call. Sakura would jump up in excitement, with Naruto basically cringing, because even if he was in a team with Sakura, then he'd be as Sasuke. When Iruka called Naruto Uzumaki, Naruto would jump up, excited that he's in a team with Sakura, a girl that he seemingly likes. And the girl, Sakura, would now facepalm, similar to Naruto did when Sasuke's name was called. She has to be on a team with that annoying Naruto, she'd think. Then Naruto would eventually say, "Hey Iruka, why does a great shinobi like myself have to be on a team with someone like Sasuke?" And Iruka would proceed to say that, well, Sasuke has the highest score in the class, while Naruto, you have the lowest. We do this to balance out the teams, as most of the class would snicker after Naruto was called the weakest. Naruto would say, "Whatever, I might be the weakest now, but someday I'll become Hokage." This would interest another person of the class who would jump up as well. This would be Kiba and Izuka. He'd say, "You be Hokage? Ha! Maybe I'll just take that title for myself." This would kind of work Naruto up, but Iruka would finally say, "Calm down now. You will be on Team 7. Your sensei, Kakashi Hatake." Naruto would sit down, as the next team would be called Team 9 and Team 10. So it continues. Naruto and his team, Sakura and Sasuke, would still be waiting hours after basically they were told what team they were. All the other genin would have been picked up by their respective sensei, while they still wait. Naruto is getting impatient, so he decides to put an eraser in the door to see, basically to prank their sensei. Sakura would, on the other hand, tell him, "Do you really think a high-level jonin would fall for that?" Naruto would rush back to his seat as someone would enter. A white, silverish-haired man would enter with a rag or at least a headband over his eye. But as he does, the eraser would fall on top of his head. Naruto would jump up and say, "Ha! Got you! That's for being so late!" Sakura being disappointed that their sensei couldn't dodge that, and Sasuke vice versa. He'd feel the same. So now Kakashi would say that, this is gonna be bothersome. Meet me up in the roof, as he puffs out into smoke. Naruto would think, a clone? But what type of clone? That wasn't a normal clone, it was physical. Yet it dispersed, similar to my Swift clones. He'd think, whatever, as he dispersed as well. Sakura would be confused to this, but turns out that the real Naruto was sitting in the hallway. As his clone dispersed, he suddenly realizes that his sensei was just in the classroom. He's like, wait, where am I? As he looks around, he was sitting in the staircase, just about to get to the roof. He'd say, wait, did I just get my clone's memories? As he walks through the door to see his sensei. Kakashi would say, how'd you get here so quickly? And Naruto would rub his chin and say, well, I left the clone in the class. And when it dispersed, somehow I knew you were up here and I knew what happened inside of the class. Kakashi would smirk saying, interesting. So you can do the shadow clone. With Naruto saying, no, I can do something called the swift clone. Kakashi would be in shock. It's been many years since the last person with swift release was born out of the leaf. But now Naruto, his sensei's son, the former user of swift release and the only person to ever add to the Leaf Village arsenal under this Kekkei Genkai, his son has his jutsu. Naruto will be a great shinobi one day. Maybe even eclipsing his father, Kakashi would think. As he'd say, okay, sit down. Naruto would sit down, and minutes later, Sasuke and Sakura would basically come up and say, how'd you get here so fast? And Naruto would just shrug, since he doesn't exactly know how to explain everything himself. Now we would get to the introductions. Kakashi would say, introduce yourself, while a certain pink-headed banshee would stand up and say, Sensei, could you please give us an example? And Kakashi would oblige. He'd say, my name is Kakashi Hatake. My interests, I don't feel like telling you. My hobbies have nothing to do with you. And my plans for the future, well, there's your explanation. Sakura would be mad that she didn't really get an explanation, so she'd just sit down at a loss. Kakashi would tell her to go, as she'd basically say that her interests are smirking and looking to Sasuke, and so forth. Kakashi would realize that she is more than just a fangirl. She is bloodshot obsessed with Sasuke. Then he'd move on to Sasuke, saying, you, Emo. As Sasuke would go on the whole rant about how he wants to restore his clan and kill a certain someone. Kakashi would then sigh. Well, the emo part was right, I guess. As he looks over to Naruto. Naruto would say, my name's Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage of the Leaf. My hobbies include eating ramen and training. I want to unlock the full capabilities of my jutsu. As he quickly goes through 4 single hand signs and then shoots off a lightning arc. This would surprise Kakashi, since the lightning arc is a 7 hand sign move. How'd Naruto do it in only 4? Whatever. He'd shrug it off for now and basically just tell them that they shouldn't eat the next morning and they're gonna meet him for the final Genin test. So they'd be off. As Naruto stands up to leave, he'd be confronted by Sasuke, who basically questions him on how he got up there so fast and how he knew a lightning jutsu. Naruto would say he doesn't need to tell Sasuke anything, as he basically has something behind Sasuke. Sasuke feels a hand, but it can't be Sakura. Both Naruto and Sakura are in his vision. As Sasuke turns around, he sees another Naruto, as the one in front of him would walk around him and the one currently there would disperse, shocking Sasuke, but not to a lethal amount, just enough for him to be frozen in place. He'd be confused. Clones can't do that. And Naruto would proceed to jump off the side of the building into some trees. Sasuke would be surprised as he can now finally move. Sakura would yell, "Naruto, how dare you do that to my Sasuke?" With Sasuke shrugging and heading down the flight of stairs. Now, we skip to the next morning. Naruto is there eating 3 cups of ramen since he used a lot of juice last night, and when he got home he kinda just crashed. So, here's a go. He starts eating and eating and eating more as he believes this is around time for him to be there. Oh shit, he's late. He would channel as much chakra as possible to get there as quickly as possible, but for some reason he's moving at double his usual speed. His swift release Kekkei Genkai chakra would finally have started affecting his body, making him naturally be able to channel its chakra, or swift chakra as I like to call it. He'd move faster and faster and eventually make it to the training field. About 10 minutes away from his house. He made it in 2. How'd he get this fast? He'd think to himself. Whatever. He dropped down and asked Sasuke and Sakura where Kakashi are, and they just shrug because they don't know. On the other hand, Kakashi was just standing at the cemetery grieving his lost friends. About 3 hours late, Kakashi would show up to see a hungry pair of Sakura and Sasuke, with Naruto not being that hungry. Kakashi would think he probably ate, as he basically explained the exercise. He has 2 bells, and for them to be able to become Genin, they need to get these bells. And if they don't, they get sent back to the academy. Sakura would start talking, but Kakashi would quickly shut her up and tell her time starts now. As they do this, Sakura and Sasuke would jump back, but Naruto wouldn't. He'd stand there and go through 3 single hand signs, throwing a lightning arc at Kakashi, which Kakashi seemingly channels chakra into his hand, basically catching it, and it would just disappear. Naruto would think, he must be really good at lightning jutsu if he could dispel that quickly. He's thinking really fast as Kakashi's somewhat moving in slow motion. But what is he doing? Naruto sees how fast Kakashi's true movements are in slow motion, thinking that he couldn't really move that fast even if he tried, as Kakashi pulled out a book and started reading. Naruto would feel insulted and then go through the hand signs to create the swift clone. Kakashi would watch this really carefully, and suddenly around him appeared 10 clones. One of them would disperse, and Kakashi would switch with the log in the forest. Naruto would say, I knew he was going to do that. At least I saved some chakra, as he dispels his clones to preserve his chakra. He'd now jump back into the forest himself and circle around trying to get behind Kakashi. Kakashi would think about how Naruto was actually being smart about this. Sure, he didn't hide like he was supposed to, but he's still trying actual shinobi tactics that even some Anbu use. Kakashi would smile. Naruto, obviously doing this unintentionally, would finally find who he thinks to be Kakashi. But he was under a genjutsu. He would basically throw one of his clones towards who he thinks is Kakashi, but would be surprised when he hears a girly scream coming off. Wait, girly scream? He'd basically slap himself on the face, unintentionally channeling chakra into his brain to undo the genjutsu, even though he didn't really know how to. He'd see Sakura being there, stunned by his clone. He'd run up to her, apologizing, saying that he could have swore that she was Kakashi. Sakura would slap him and say that, "It's genjutsu, you moron!" Then they'd come up with a plan. Sakura obviously wants her and Sasuke to basically win, but if she doesn't do something, then they're all gonna lose, because not even Sasuke can stand up to a Jonin himself. Her and Naruto would slowly start trying to come up with ideas and eventually stumble across Sasuke. When they run it by him that they might work together and the two that gets the bells are basically going to be the two that passes. Sasuke would say that they're planning on stealing the bells and then just jumps at Kakashi. Kakashi now knows the location of all three Genin. Well, it's up in anyways. So Naruto and Sakura would jump out trying to work in cohesion with Sasuke, but Sasuke would kick Naruto in the chest and punch Sakura to get out of his way because they're getting in the way. And after some taijutsu and Naruto and Sakura jumping back into the forest, Sasuke would throw a fire-style fireball jutsu. But as he does this, Kakashi hears a ring. Kakashi would basically just seemingly teleport, obviously using the body flicker, to where the bell is, saying that time's up. He tied them up mostly because of Sasuke not collaborating and Naruto eating ahead of time, so Naruto would be the one to tie up. He'd explain that teamwork is key and all the yada yada he did in canon, and that they're not allowed to give Naruto food or else they're not allowed to retake the test. While Kakashi was off in the bushes, Sakura was kind of mad at Sasuke for doing what he did because they were actually trying to help him, but she understands. He just wants to pass, she thinks. But Naruto, on the other hand, he actually tried to help. Maybe they should give him food, as she hears his stomach growling. I thought so. She then say that Naruto should have some of her food, with Sasuke saying that if she does that, she's costing them all the rank of Genin. She'd say that teamwork is the most important, so what more can you do than not feed your teammate? Feed him and we will have a better chance at winning. So Sasuke would say that no, Naruto should take his food, he doesn't eat as much, and this would cause Kakashi to basically once again teleport out of the trees, seemingly using the body flicker, appearing in front of the three Genin saying, You! Pass! All three would now sit with the shocked face because they thought they were going back to the academy, and he'd explain that yes, they should have given him food because without that their teamwork would have been even sloppier because they would have been a person down. They would accept this, and he'd say that their next test comes in the next day, or not their next test, but their first mission comes in the next day. So something leads to something, and they would appear the next morning, Naruto being about 2 hours early. For some reason, Kakashi's there too. Kakashi would say that he hoped that Naruto would be here early, and he wanted to talk to him. Kakashi and Naruto would have a quick conversation, Naruto explaining his swift release, or what he believes, and how he opened the scroll ceiling. This would trigger something in Kakashi's mind. They probably have some sort of ceiling tag to optimize affinity. He'd pull some sort of paper out of his pocket saying, channel chakra into this. Naruto would channel chakra, and the paper would start crunching up, but as it does, it gets chopped into multiple tiny pieces. Oh, not even Sensei could do it like this. Does he have that high of an affinity for both wind and lightning? Kakashi would think and say, well, Naruto, you might just be an interesting case. I really want to do some things and train you to use this power better. Naruto would smirk and say, okay, then show me something. Kakashi, not really knowing what he could show Naruto, would say that, and what exactly would that be? Naruto would kind of facepalm and then pull a piece of paper out of his shirt, the paper he wrote all the jutsu on. He'd show Kakashi one specific jutsu, which wasn't necessarily a jutsu. It was just evenly channeling and distributing chakra throughout your body. Kakashi would once again be curious, saying that maybe Naruto should just try it. Try channeling chakra everywhere in his body at once. Naruto would do this, but as he does this, his chakra unstabilizes and a large burst of lightning bursts out of his body, leaving tiny cuts all over him. Nothing threatening and nothing that would hurt too much, but it does sting a bit. Kakashi would say, maybe you're not good enough at chakra yet. We'll try this again later when training starts for your team. So Sasuke and Sakura would show up to see Kakashi and Naruto just sitting there talking. And Kakashi would be surprised. It hasn't even been a full 2 hours and Naruto's wounds are completely gone. Is this his ability or the Nine Tails Kakashi would fathom? But whatever, the rest of his team is here. He'd explained that their first mission would be today, and that this mission would be catching a cat. So all of them would not have gone into the Hokage's office. Kakashi would have just gone in and got one early. So all day they'd use teamwork to try and catch this cat, and it took them almost 3 whole days to catch it, surprisingly. Their coordination wasn't all too good, but after some talking from their sensei, they were finally convinced to work together. It's been about 3 days since they started, but this can't get them down. They took longer than most of the teams to get their first mission done, but Kakashi decides not to continue missions. He'd say that he'll make a deal with them. For the next month, they'll be doing 1 mission a week, and the rest of the days will all be on training. Everyone would get excited, they'd get stronger. Sasuke would finally be able to avenge his clan by killing his brother because he's finally getting training. Naruto might be able to master the jutsu he's been working on. And Sakura, well, she's just excited because she might catch up to Sasuke type of thing. So, now what? Kakashi is going to tell them that their first training is going to be something called tree walking. So, he'd explain the basics, walking up and down a tree, as his genin follow. After only a single try, Sakura somehow makes it up the tree, sitting on the branch. She'd be excited while Naruto and Sasuke are barely being able to reach the middle of the tree, scratching it. Naruto has an idea. He would use as much chakra as he could into his legs, basically chomping and exploding the tree bark under him, but then doing it again, bursting himself upward off of the bark that's exploding. How could he do this, Kakashi would think, as he thought back to his childhood. Minato, known as the Yellow Flash, the fastest shinobi alive. One day he had asked his sensei how his speed was so immense, and Minato would explain. His first jutsu, which is the fastest technique known to man, the Flying Raijin, is a teleportation type jutsu, which functions by connecting 2 places with a seal. While his other is his Kekkei Genkai, Swift Release. It basically lightens his body to the point where it weighs nothing, but the lightning coursing through it would create enough power to basically be able to slingshot himself off of anything. So the mixture of no weight and extreme power, with the wind also not colliding with his body, like there's no wind resistance. He'd be able to move at incredible speeds. Kakashi would think that this is probably what Naruto just did. He made himself weightless and then just shot himself off of something that had semi-transparent weight. And Naruto would land on the branch. Sakura would think that Naruto had gotten it right, saying, "You got it right, Naruto." But Kakashi would interfere. He did not get it right. He's supposed to stick to the tree, not jump off of it. Sasuke was a little angry when Naruto got top, but now that he knows Naruto did it wrong, he also knows that Naruto put in too much, so he knows to put in a little less. Over the span of the next few days, I'ma say 3 or 4, the two would slowly figure out ways to stick to the tree. Naruto would be able to get the right amount of chakra in, not by doing the right amount of chakra, but by continuously doing less. And for some reason, he just gets faster up and up the tree. This is because he's making himself weightless unconsciously, and just walking up easier. At times, when he does put too much in, he gets slingshotted off with an immense pressure. And when he puts too little, he just has to try and move faster. It lets him stick more. So, after figuring out that he's been doing it wrong, he'd finally be able to stick to the tree and move up and down it freely. While Sakura, these few days, has also been doing this to more or less increase her chakra reserves than anything else. Sasuke would now confront Naruto, asking him how he got it right, and he'd explain that he would cut away massive and small amounts of chakra or add them by to try and figure out how much chakra he needs to put into the tree, which after a few minutes Sasuke would be able to do too, off this advice from Naruto. He'd feel stupid not having thought of this himself. But whatever.
They'd go back to Kakashi, and this would be their first week as a shinobi, basically done, and they'd ask him what's next. Can we finally learn some cool jutsu? Now that we can walk up trees? How helpful, Naruto would comment. And Kakashi would say, it is helpful. You're being thrown off a cliff. There's no water at the side, or at the bottom. What would you do? Try and land on my feet? Naruto would question. And Kakashi would say, no. You'd break your legs. What you do is you try and get as close to the ledge as possible and then start running alongside it, slowly channeling chakra in so that you could slowly start slowing down. Your chakra would help you stick to the wall and thus reduce your fall. Naruto would say, interesting. And Kakashi would say, your next exercise is walking on water. This time, they're really not believing this, with some of them even saying, that's just impossible, sensei. How would one go about doing that? Kakashi would explain that, just like tree walking, channeling chakra could basically do anything. And for water, instead of it being a spike, it's more like a pool of chakra underneath your feet that constantly changes as the density of the water does, or as the water moves, to try and keep yourself afloat. He'd suggest they go home and get swimsuits. They'll continue this tomorrow. They'd agree, basically only having trained for a few hours, not even the entire day, as they would head home. They'd all come the next day with their swimming suits on instead of just bringing it with, and Kakashi would be sitting there with the scroll. We got our next mission. They'd all be a little mad since he didn't tell them that there was going to be a mission, but he'd chuckle and just say that, well, I told you once a week, and this is that day of the week. We have to first walk the dogs at the Unuzuka compound, then help farmers get rid of weeds, and then last of all, we need to clean the Hokage faces as they look up to see the Hokage faces are rather dirty. Naruto would say that when he used to pull pranks, they were never that dirty, and Kakashi would say that's because you would always clean them afterwards, so we need to go do that too. And as the day progressed, they would slowly be taking care of this, or at least slowly taking care of these exercises, being able to clean the Hokage monument faster than Naruto ever could by sticking to them. They'd basically comment on how helpful this was, and basically Kakashi would say that I told you this will come in use. Naruto snapping back, saying, well, shinobi shouldn't be cleaning stuff, isn't this a civilian job? Getting thrown a rock by Kakashi, almost falling off himself, but quickly being able to stick back to the face, quickly scrubbing so that he doesn't get Kakashi's attention again. And as the sun sets, they get back to the training field, all tired, falling down on the grass. Kakashi would say, well, time to start training. All three of them, Sasuke, Sakura, and Naruto, would simultaneously say, but we worked all day, we can't train all night too? Semi in sync, getting different reactions from everyone. Naruto and Sasuke basically more or less gushing and looking away because they said the same thing, cringe, and Sakura being excited that her and Sasuke are on the same wavelength. Whatever. Sasuke would just walk up to the water and try to step on it as he falls in. He comes out shivering because he's only in swimming trunks, and that was really cold. Kakashi would say, you didn't let me demonstrate. I said it's not like the tree walking, as he'd start walking. He'd explain that how the tree walking works is creating chakra spikes into the tree, while on the water it's like a little pad that flows underneath your feet. You don't necessarily have to predict how the waves are going to go, you just need to be able to let your chakra be flexible enough to kind of go on its own. Sakura would think that she's once again going to get it first try, but surprisingly doesn't. She falls into the water almost immediately. Gosh darn it, now I'm wet! With Naruto giggling, saying, don't worry, Sakura, you look as cute as ever being in the water. Sakura would basically quickly make her way out, hitting Naruto on the head, saying, I'm not interested in you, you moron. I'm only here for Sasuke-kun. With Sasuke just, being like, I don't care. So, now Naruto has to try. Naruto would listen to what Kakashi had said and try and channel his chakra as little as possible so that it could flow. And for a few seconds he floats on the water and then just goes under. as Kakashi says, "You're not supposed to be making yourself weightless." Oh shit. He should not have said that, as all three immediately question what he meant. Well, the beans are out of the bag. He'd explained that he was basically student to the 4th Hokage, who also had swift release. And he'd explained that swift release works that the wind sometimes reduces any weight around you by reducing gravity and wind resistance. So, in the very least, swift release users can make themselves weightless, but generate enough power from the lightning in their system to be able to move. Since there's no wind resistance, there's nothing slowing them down while weightless. So, this would kind of make Sasuke angry. Sure, he has the potential to get the Sharingan, but Naruto already has this OP KK Genkai that the fastest and smartest shinobi ever lived used. Whatever. Now they need to do it. And Kakashi would put weights on Naruto's arms so that he couldn't make himself weightless. This would also put Naruto at a disadvantage since he had a lot more weight. He almost had double his body weight pushing down on him to go underneath the water. But he didn't. They trained throughout the next entirety of a week, somehow struggling more on this. Mostly because Kakashi decided to put weights on all of them to make it a little more fair. Naruto would quickly learn how to switch on and off the weightlessness, which he couldn't do before, and also learn how to walk on water, just like his other teammates. For some reason, he's excelling really quickly, but he doesn't tell them he knows how to turn off his weightlessness. And also, he learned how to make other objects not be affected by wind resistance, like kunai. So, he can essentially move a lot faster by making his clothes weightless now too. He's been training a lot, and as the last day of training for this week is complete, Naruto would collapse. Everyone would be worried. What happened to him? Didn't Kakashi Sensei he has reserves like a monster? How did he not last as long as us? With Kakashi finally stepping in and saying that Naruto's probably been training throughout the nights too, trying to get his powers down. I wondered how he got this down so fast, especially with those weights. He's been pushing himself too hard. Naruto the next morning would wake up in the hospital, asking where he is frantically, to see that Kakashi was sitting there with his book. "Oh, Naruto, you passed out from chakra exhaustion last night. Turns out you haven't slept all week, at least according to the gate guards. You've been training every night." And Naruto would look down, saying that he's never been as smart as Sakura or as strong as Sasuke. The least he could do is train day and night to catch up to them, because he doesn't want to be a burden. With Kakashi giving him that classic one-eyed smile, saying, "Don't worry about it, Naruto. You're just as strong as Sasuke and just as smart as Sakura. You're a team. You come up with each other's shortcomings." Which puts a smile on Naruto's face, so now it's time. He'd say that there's no time for Naruto to rehabilitate, his chakra reserves are back, and they have a mission. Naruto would question this, and Kakashi would say that they have a few more C and D rank missions. And after that, ruthless training. They would get their first C rank mission a week after this, and it would be to transport basically logs to somewhere or some village in the land of fire, not really causing much and being pretty uneventful. They'd be training more in taijutsu and teamwork than they would be in individual jutsu, since all of them had generally improved with basically chakra control and chakra reserves. So now the only thing that's left to do is to start doing better missions. As they went in that day to request a new mission, they'd basically stumble in with Naruto immediately demanding a new mission. The current Hokage, who is a Ruzen, would look up to their sensei Kakashi with a questioning face. Kakashi would reply that, "I've already taught them all the basics, like Genin level, Taijutsu, Fuinjutsu, also basic chakra control like tree and water walking. I think they're ready for a higher tier C rank mission." Hiruzen would basically just rub his chin and say, "There's no bandit missions or anything, but there are quite a few bandits in the hidden wave. Why don't you take Tazuna, the bridge builder, sorry for mumbling everyone, take Tazuna the bridge builder back to the land of waves. It will take you about a week or two because it is quite a long distance and the building of the bridge will take long. But you do have an increased... I'm sorry guys, I'm really stuttering a lot, but he basically just says that there's an increased chance that they run into bandits. They'd be excited and Iruka would just let in Tazuna as he says, "Finally got a team to accept my mission?" And Hiruzen would nod and basically look at Naruto's team. Tazuna would soon follow his eyes with the Hiruzen's, seeing them and saying, "3 kids. How can you put kids to protect someone like me?" Obviously, he's drunk. He's stumbling over his own words just like I am mine. And he'd say, "The girl looks weak. And these 2 look nothing more than just goons." Naruto would say, basically jump up saying, "What did you say about me? Let me at him." As Sakura and Sasuke both just hold him back. And he'd say, "What are you gonna do about it, shorty?" And as he says this, Naruto finally calms down. "Whatever. Can't get the money from the mission if I kill him myself." Basically just making Tazuna flinch by pretending he's gonna attack him again. Tazuna would say, okay, let's just get going." Kakashi would say that they would be there to meet up in an hour at the Leaf Village gate. They would all meet back at Konoha's head gate and meet with Kakashi and the bridge builder. As they arrive, Kakashi basically talks about formation. He will be out back, while Naruto is to the right, Sasuke is to the left, and Sakura is up front. This would be the optimal formation for a Genin team. So they're going to be walking around the bridge builder in this pattern. They would start their trip, and not too long after embarking on their way to the land of waves, they would see a puddle. First, Sakura wouldn't really notice anything, but Naruto would start feeling everything around him get slow, as he sees everyone walking slowly and he doesn't really get it. His perception had started speeding up. As he looks around, he sees the puddle, or what seems to be something jumping out of the puddle. His senses, they're insane. His speed, insane as well. As he leaps forward to grab the 2 figures that just jumped out, throwing them against a tree. Sasuke and Kakashi, who are also ready to react seeing this, would be surprised that Naruto moved faster than they were aware of. Kakashi would have seen the movements, but he could not have predicted them, while Sasuke and Sakura couldn't even see them blatantly. As they see Naruto coming out of his slow motion type of mindset, and the 2 demon brothers against the tree, basically knocked out laying on top of each other, Naruto would turn around. And in Naruto's mind, he just hears them talking slowly, and it starts speeding up. And then it's finally normal speed. His perception is changing. He doesn't really get it, but he needs to control this, because this might be the ultimate weapon within battle. That's when he basically just goes, huh? Because hearing people talk slow is not a really good thing, because who can really make that out? And Sakura repeated herself, "How'd you know they were there, Naruto?" Naruto would have to think quickly on his feet and say, Why would there be water in the leaf? When last did it even rain? Kind of chuckling, basically rubbing the back of his head, while Kakashi knows that this probably has something to do with the reaction speed and not really predicament, because Naruto wasn't ready for that in the least. Sasuke and Sakura were at least on guard, while Naruto was just lounging around. Could he have been on guard? Kakashi thinks to himself. No, not without him knowing. This is when Kakashi would confront Tazuna. These are 2 dangerous Chunin from the mist. What isn't he telling them? Tazuna would then go about the whole spout about Gato and how the wave need it and they'll pay them back afterwards. Kakashi and his group would all agree since they're hyped for a bigger mission and would continue on their way. The next important thing would be when they surface off the boat in the actual land of waves, where a mist cloud basically surrounds the entire place. As they make their way, you just hear Kakashi screaming, "Duck!"
as Kakashi and Sasuke both start going down. In this time, Naruto tries to up his mindset again to be able to see everything in slow motion, but it doesn't work. Then Sakura would basically dive him to the ground, barely saving his life. She'd say that, "Naruto, you're so stupid. Like, you were so fast earlier, but now you almost died. This is why Sasuke..." Yeah, she's doing that. Yeah, don't worry about it. She's doing that. Naruto would obviously have thought for a second that Sakura might have cared, but then she brought up the Sasuke spiel. And now he's like, ugh, whatever. He'd stand back up, basically thanking her for basically saving him, and would concentrate put his attention on Zabuza, who had just landed on the blade that almost cleaved their heads off. Kakashi would say, "Zabuza of the Mist," as he lifts his headband, prepared for a fight. "Oh well, a team from the Leaf. Oh, and Kakashi of the Sharingan," as it might look. Sasuke, hearing the word Sharingan, he slingshots his neck backwards, seeing Kakashi spinning 3 Tomo Sharingan. He'd be in shock, thinking, how does he have the Sharingan? While Kakashi prepares to fight. I'm not going to go too deep into fights that are not regarding Naruto, but Kakashi and Zabuza's fight goes more or less the same, with Zabuza eventually trapping Kakashi in a water prison. What can I say? And Naruto and Sasuke would have to free him, but Naruto's not interested. He just uses his enhanced speed by channeling as much chakra through his body, or at least this is the only trigger he's found so far, to move as fast as possible. But everything gets blurry around him since he can't see so well. But that's why he's trying to enhance his perception once more, because if he can see faster, he can move faster. He would basically just bolt towards Zabuza, having their bodies clash, somewhat stumbling Zabuza over. His clone would divert attention to Naruto, trying to cleave him apart, but Kakashi would be able to stop the clone's blade and destroy it after being knocked out of the water prison. And the whole spiel will once again continue, with Haku eventually being able to save Kakashi. Zabuza. She'd pretend to kill Zabuza and then be off. Sorry. I know some of the people are going to bring up that Haku's a boy. So there. Now, what is going to happen is Kakashi's exhausted. They need to get to Tazuna's house, so Tazuna takes them there. Naruto and everyone there would have the same interaction, so I'm not really going to get into it. I'm going to time skip a little bit to when Kakashi wakes up and gives them training exercises. He doesn't really know much to teach them, so he'd rather think about strategy. That Miss Nin was able to, or that Hunter Nin was able to conceal their presence, even beyond that of his Sharingan being able to see. So she's really good at that. And also her movement was instantaneous. She didn't use a body flicker for he didn't feel any chakra. So she's just fast. He obviously, but they still think it's girl. And he knows that Zabuza could be beaten by him, but greatly overpowers him. He has an idea of how he could beat Zabuza, but Naruto and Sasuke will have to handle the boy, girl, Hunter Nin, whatever the fuck you want to call Haku. So he's going to have them focus on speed training. He doesn't exactly have weights, so he's going to put up a timer. He wants them to basically channel as much chakra throughout their body as possible to get to one point and back to another. This is mostly step up to eventually getting the body flicker. I'm not going to give them this early. So what's going to happen is that he's going to basically mark one tree and mark another tree that are as far away from each other as possible and have the 3 genin try to move between them. He knows that Naruto is going to be able to do it easy because of his Kekkei Genkai, but controlling it is something else. Kakashi knows that Naruto can't really see well in this form, so he's going to try and have Naruto, instead of going from one tree to the other, kind of zigzag through trees and over and under things so that he can enhance his perception. And he has to do it in the same time Sakura and Sasuke have to move between 2 trees. So this is basically going to be the week's training. Sakura would probably get the bodily enhancement down quicker, with Sasuke, hurting himself by putting in too much chakra, then not really being enhanced at all by putting too little. And Sakura would basically tell him about how if you channel chakra only to your legs, you go faster, because think about the tree exercise, blah blah blah, shit like that. Less, more, until you figure out what you get. Sasuke would feel kind of dumb because, why the fuck did he not figure that out type of anger. Sorry for cussing, but yeah, that's what he thinks. He's like, yo, how the hell do I make this mistake 3 times in a row? But whatever. He get it down pretty easily by the week's end, and I didn't want to really focus on them. Naruto, on the other hand, had to go through different obstacles and make it in the same speed, so his pure speed would not be the case. He has to control how much of his speed he puts out and how he can control it. So he'd start by just trying to put as little speed in as possible by doing the same thing he did with the chakra control or the tree walking, and basically trying to figure out how much he needs to pump in. He'd many times go too fast, run against the tree, and knock himself out. So by the end of the week, he didn't really figure it out that much, while Sasuke and Sakura had already finished. So he decides he's going to pull an all-nighter to try and figure this out one more time, and falls asleep on the ground. This is when Haku, dressed like a girl, would show up and try to kill Naruto, but he'd wake up and they'd have the entire conversation with people you're special about, and Naruto basically saying that he's out here trying to control his speed. He's going too fast to see, so he doesn't really know what to do, and he's struggling too much to control the amount of speed he puts out. When Haku would let it slip that, oh, if you're going too fast, why don't you just enhance your eyes like the rest of your body? Thus your eyes would be able to keep up. This would obviously be one of Haku's tricks for this. Naruto would be like, oh, are you a shinobi or something? Haku having to cover like, oh, no. It just seems simple. That's it. And then Naruto being like, I like you, you're cool. And Haku being like, I'm a boy. Naruto face palming. So Naruto would head back to get some lunch because he was in a little rough condition, while Haku made his way back to Zabuza. Naruto would get there and say that he has a breakthrough of how he might be able to control his speed, not in the speed sense, but how he control moving while speeding. Kakashi would think, okay, but you'll have to focus on it a later time. I feel that Zabuza is back up and running. Maybe we need to go protect Tazuna. So the group would go protect Tazuna, and as Kakashi predicted, when they arrive at the bridge, there he is, Zabuza and Haku, this time not wearing the mask. Naruto would basically be like, You're the boy from yesterday, or this morning. Haku would smile and say, yes, and now I know your only skill is your speed, as Haku would try and throw a senbon at Naruto. Naruto would channel chakra into his eyes and would basically be able to see the senbon, basically being able to throw up his hand and hit it away as it's about to hit him. Haku would say, impressive. Off of that one thing I told you, in no training you're able to enhance your vision already. Zabuza would question it, and Haku would explain that he wasn't thinking while talking to him earlier. He tried to kill him, but that would have put up too much suspicion. Then they'd have to search for the bridge builder instead of them coming to hit them. And it was kind of a slip up more than anything. Zabuza would push it off and then basically tell Haku to kill the bridge builder. He'll handle Kakashi. Kakashi and Zabuza's fight is going to go exactly like canon. There's nothing going to be different about it. While Naruto and Haku are going to brawl it out on the other hand, instead of Sasuke. Naruto would now not only be enhancing his eyes, but would be realizing that he has to enhance his brain too, because he's not thinking as fast as he did last time. So he's putting chakra into his legs, his arms, not the rest of his body, because there's really no point. Haku is just throwing senbon, not really giving him any hits or landing any blows, so there's no point in buffing his durability. He'd also be obviously buffing his mind, so yeah. They'd be clashing and Sasuke would barely be able to see little squiggly lines all over the air, so he might be able to assume where they are. When Haku sees an opening, maybe he can take care of some of the others, as he throws a senbon towards Sasuke. Sasuke would see the Senbon coming, already being enhancing his eyes to try and keep up with the fight, and his eyes turn red as he's barely able to dodge it. His Sharingan had awakened, one Tomo in one eye and two in the other. Now he thinks he might be able to keep up. He starts pumping his body with chakra and trying to stay with Naruto and Haku, but would quickly fall behind once again. And as Haku was about to land a fatal strike on Sasuke, Naruto would jump in front of him, for Sasuke to only throw Naruto out of the way last second, taking a bunch of Senbon. Haku thinks she got them. Both of them are standing still. He'd quickly go through the hand signs and chant, "Demonic ice mirrors!" Sasuke would stand up saying, "You idiot! You got in my way. This is your fault," as they once now have to start dodging Haku as the increasing speed between mirrors are going. Naruto knows that he'd have to enhance his sight even more to be able to see the speed. Then he'd realize that those aren't Senbon being thrown out of the mirror, that's actually Haku jumping from one to another. He tries grabbing Haku, but Haku would make it through and then say, "Oh no, no, no," as all the mirror clones basically start doing hand signs, and he'd say, "1,000 ice mirrors." Sasuke's body, moving on its own, would basically push Naruto because this Naruto would be their only hope, covering him, taking most of the Senbon to his back. He'd start bleeding out of his mouth and even cough some on Naruto and say, "You idiot, you were too slow," as he falls over. Naruto, now enraged, his eyes would go slinted and his aura would burst, a tail and ears coming off. Haku knows what this is. He's a Jinchuriki. But I thought Jinchuriki auras were red. That's right, Naruto's aura is not red. It's shining blue with a tint of white. Wind swirling all around him and lightning jumping through his chakra. He disappeared from even Haku's sight, hitting her him from every direction. How? And as Haku thinks she sees Naruto, this Naruto just explodes, cutting him all over the body, destroying his clothes as lightning starts searing through his body. He starts screaming in agony as he hears Zabuza whistle. The last amount of chakra he has, pumps it into his feet and is able to make it to in front of Zabuza. But Naruto sees this and jumps after him. As Kakashi's hand penetrates Haku, Naruto grabs his hand to try and stop him. But it's too late. It's penetrated Haku, and Zabuza says, "Haku, you're supposed to stop him, not take the blow." As Haku says, You're my precious one, Zabuza," and fades from this world. Naruto, who had snapped out of his one-tailed cloak, would start going on the rant he did. Basically how Zabuza doesn't appreciate Haku, even though Haku was willing to give his life for Zabuza. And the Gato thing happens. Gato's like, "Yo, look at the big bad demon of the mist, blah blah blah," which would cause a reaction in Zabuza, where he asked Naruto to clear him a path so he can kill Gato himself. Naruto would throw a kunai and basically Zabuza would catch it with his mouth. As Naruto disappears from sight, his perception higher than ever, hitting and kicking every single person in his way. His body feels rejuvenated in chakra for some reason. This is the Nine-Tails chakra still pouring through him. He'd quickly dispose of most of the goons through the middle as Zabuza runs up and tries to kill Gato. He'd basically leave Gato with a threat as he falls over. Naruto would then knock out Gato and leave him to the villagers to deal with. Then the rest of the bandits would run off, either becoming a part of society or just going somewhere else. So now Gato was dead, Zabuza and Haku had been buried. And now, a week later, the village is rebuilt. Now that they're back on their feet, they'll start paying the leaf slowly but surely. Basically paying off their debt, if you will. So, now, they must go back. The village is awaiting them. They've spent too much time, and they want to get home. They've been a little homesick. So as they decide to leave, the bridge will be renamed the Great Naruto Bridge, and all that. And to those asking, what about Tamari? He would have gotten killed, him and his mother, blah blah blah. No, Naruto left the clone. It's that easy. So, Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura had just returned from their mission in the Land of Water. Their sensei had revealed that he had signed them up for the Chunin exams, and if they did want to participate, that they'd need to fill out sheets, as he would give them said sheets. He'd explained that if they fill in those sheets and go to a certain place into a certain class, they are going to be put into basically the Chunin exams. So they'd all think it over, and the next day when the Chunin exams would roll around, they would actually decide to go. All of them would see each other outside of the school and decide to walk in together. They'd start making their way up the stairs when they basically see the classroom they're supposed to be in. When they do get there, they see basically two Chunin looking people basically shoving an odd fella in green. This odd fella in green is, as we all know, Rock Lee. He'd tell them to let him through, as the two Chunin would continue to say that no one there is worthy of entering. Naruto and his team would just casually walk by, as basically everyone would try to stop them and ask them where they're going. They're probably scared, huh? They would then look back and Naruto would reply, "We all well know that that's a genjutsu, so y'all can drop it. This is the second floor. We're supposed to be on the third floor." As they just continue past them to the next stairwell, making their way up. They don't make it too far until the boy in green, previously basically shoved on the ground, would basically appear in front of Naruto, saying, "Hey you, I heard you're the fastest genin in your class. I want to fight you." As Naruto would say, "I would fight you, but it's the Chunin exams and I'm not sure we're allowed to fight quite yet." Sasuke would basically snicker and say that Naruto is a little bit of a crybaby. He's a little bit scared of a dude in green. Naruto would then say, "Buckle him up." Rock Lee would then proceed to say the rules. No ninjutsu. Only taijutsu, because that's the only thing he can perform. Naruto would think it over and explain that he has a passive Kekkei Genkai that he can't really deactivate. Is it okay if it stays active? Because he doesn't really know how to deal with it. Rock Lee will say so be it, as long as he casts no jutsu, it would be fair game. They would start by just hand-to-hand combat, nothing really, but slowly Lee would start to speed up. Lee's group, which consists of Neji and Tenten, would think that Naruto is about to suffer a severe beating, would be surprised as Lee and Naruto both start disappearing from their vision and reappearing every time they clash. Naruto would quickly start perceiving things faster as his body starts moving faster. It's really hard to control at this point, but he thinks he's got a staple on it. Lee would basically be able to match his current top speed, where Lee would try and actually beat him. But their top speeds seem to clash. They can't really outspeed each other. They can't really outskill each other either. Naruto has better perception of how his movements work, and Lee has, just pure better fighting skill. So it would end in the two of them basically just standing and then walking apart. Neji would question Lee why he did not finish the kid off, and Lee would respond with, "Easy, Neji. I couldn't outspeed him. I couldn't outfight him either. It seemed like he was predicting every one of my moves. Same goes for him. He couldn't really outspeed or outskill me. So, we will leave this fight until the end of the Chunin exams." This would be a shock for both Neji and Tenten, and also Sakura and Sasuke, because they know Naruto is a beast when it comes to speed. And thinking that there's someone as fast, if not faster, just boggles their minds. So they'd proceed. Both teams would make it into the class, where basically Naruto's team would be encountered by another group of genin who would start talking with them. Banter would go back and forth, and at the end of the day, what would happen is another person would walk up to their to a now gathered group of genin and say, "You should stop being loud. Everyone in here is already targeting this group since you're, first years." Well, my name's Kabuto. As before Kabuto could even finish saying his name, he would have been cut off by Naruto saying, "Hey yo, Ayo, we did not ask you to come over here and tell us what to do. You go stand over there, glasses. Obviously, being the cocky Naruto part that I mentioned in the last part. So, now Kabuto is getting angry. He's like, hey, yo, I just came over here to try and help y'all. I'm from y'all village. I don't want these people from other villages to kill y'all. So, Naruto has an idea. Okay, how could you help us? Kabuto would then explain that he has these cards that basically allow him to gather information on someone. Or he already has pre-gathered information about everyone in this room. So Naruto would ask about Rock Lee, and Kabuto would quickly reveal his card. Rock Lee, Team Guy. Neji, Tenten, teammates. Sensei, Guy. Missions, A rank, 3. B rank, 3. C rank, 25. D rank, 58. They have been on a lot of missions. This sincerely shocks Naruto. He'd ask quickly, Ayo, how long they been shinobi? And Kabuto would quickly point out, only 1 year. Naruto would be surprised that anyone could gain that amount of power so quickly, even though he was able to match that first year, but that wouldn't be possible without his Kekkei Genkai. Kabuto would proceed to say, Rock Lee also has a medical mutation that prevents him from performing nin or genjutsu. His chakra network moves away too slowly to the point where it's near dormant. And this would cause Naruto to kind of panic, because this kid is that powerful without chakra, his teammates are probably fucking monsters. He'd then say, okay, as another person would jump out. Jonin Ibiki. Ibiki would basically tell the maggots in the room to sit down according to the number on the table, and they'd all quickly find their seats. They'd realize none of them are close to their teammates, and Ibiki would continue to explain. In this test of the Chunin exams, being the first test, you will answer a sheet of 10. These questions are questions that can only be answered by Chunin. So, if you are caught cheating, you would get a strike. If you get 3 strikes, your entire team would be removed. If you do not answer the 10th question successfully, which would be given after the rest of the exam, you will be failed and would never be allowed to become a Chunin. Everyone would quickly start stressing, but would easily start taking the test. As they do their thing, Naruto would realize that they were supposed to cheat. He'd quickly basically gain control over a little faster perception. Nothing to the point where he does in combat, but to the point where he can look at someone else's sheep for a millisecond and basically be able to read what it says. He'd quickly start copying the girl next to him, Hinata, without her realizing it, or anyone actually realizing it, as another boy, seemingly from the sand, would go to the bathroom. In the bathroom, basically, the guard would be knocked out and replaced by a puppet from the sand boy, and he'd return. He'd quickly be able to pass the test just like everyone else, but nearing the end, when the 9th question for everyone and the timer would run out, Ibiki would say, if you wish to take the 10th question, stay. If you do not, follow the 9 other teams that were eliminated by cheating. Now, who's gonna stay? Naruto would get up and as a lot of teams left, and say, I'm not leaving. Even if I don't become a Chunin, so be it. I will be the first Genin Hokage. There's nothing saying that a Genin can't go on higher ranked missions or be paid more. It's just, you'd be a Genin. It means people just wouldn't respect you as much. So, I'm gonna continue to the 10th question, and I hope you all reconsider it. A lot of teams who were about to leave would also decide to stay, which would mean that a lot more people than were supposed to actually passed. Ibiki was about to say something as someone else burst through the window. Anko Mitarashi. As a banner flew up behind her and basically a party popper shot off behind her too, she'd say, I am the sexiest shinobi in Konoha. I am Anko Mitarashi, proctor of the 2nd exam. Now follow me, maggots. As Ibiki would tell her that, hey yo, I wasn't finished yet, and she would not care. She would leap back out of the window as the Genin would start to follow. Following the curvy shinobi, wearing only fishnet undercoats and a large trench coat over it, They would arrive at a location within the leaf known as the Forest of Death, or one of the many Chunin training grounds. She would continue to explain that this is the Forest of Death, the second part of the Chunin exams. For you to succeed, you would all have to. Then she would continue to explain that there are Earth and Moon scrolls. Each team would be given one by random. They are to hide said scroll and then move into the forest. Within the forest, they must gather a scroll by defeating another team and then move to the center tower. After explaining this, all the groups would then have to go into this little hut where they would both sign a waiver saying that if they die, it is not the Leaf's fault, and they would also be given their scroll, which would quickly go. Each team would be sent to their gate. When they arrive at their gate, teams quickly begin plotting. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura would be one gate or another gate over from Tenten, Lee, and Neji. There would be one group in between them, and that they decide to go the other direction since Naruto couldn't even outspeed Neji the last time. They would quickly enter the forest after time has begun and run into another group of shinobi. The team they do run into are a team from the Hidden Rain. They would quickly start fighting amongst themselves and each other and discover that the Rain are using both genjutsu and physical clones to try and throw them off, to which are real clones, which are solid, all the type of mathematic, whatever. I'm tired. So they'd basically proceed to start figuring out the combination when Naruto would figure something out. There is water everywhere, so the genjutsu is most probably transmitted by the water. He'd quickly throw off the only lightning style jutsu he knows, being basically the swift clone, which would disperse into lightning and air, and would quickly take out many clones of the wind, and the lightning itself would be conducted through the water as Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura jumped on his command. One of the three Rain Ninja would be caught in said electricity. Two of them would jump out. The illusion had now dropped, and it would be a battle between Sasuke and Sakura with the two remaining ones, while Naruto checked that the third one was unconscious. He would quickly find an Earth Scroll, and he would basically call to them and say, "Knock it off." Obviously, both groups would look confused at Naruto like, "Nani, why would we call a fight off?" He'd explain that both groups have Earth Scrolls, so it's pointless in them fighting. They would call a temporary truce and decide to head opposite directions. They would quickly split off paths, not really having fought all that much, when Naruto says, "Hey yo, I gotta take a piss. Y'all move on. I'll be right with y'all." He would then stay behind for a few seconds and continue to leak. But as he's doing so, he would be rushed by a giant snake. This snake would quickly swallow him since Naruto wasn't expecting it, but whatever. Now with Sakura and Sasuke, they see a lady they had saw before the exams. Anko had threw a kunai at Naruto to basically see the speech he's heard so much about from people like Kakashi. Naruto would have dodged the kunai pretty effortlessly, while another genin would have walked up behind Anko, basically with the kunai in her tongue giving it to Anko. She gave off real snake vibes, if you know what I mean. This same genin would now stand in a tree, basically threatening Sasuke and Sakura. She did not ask for the scroll, but she did ask for Sasuke. She had asked that the Uchiha be handed over and that the rest of the group leave. She said that the blonde boy has already been eaten by a giant serpent, while the two of them will be closely following. They would quickly say that who does she think she is when she starts bursting her aura. This would make it really obvious that she's no ordinary kid. She feels like she could be Kage level. Sasuke and Sakura would both be frozen as a giant snake comes arisen, and the girl would now jump onto said snake. Said snake would stop all of a sudden, with the girl basically screaming confused, saying, "Move forward, you stupid snake," as it would start slowly swelling, and it would electrocute her all of a sudden. She'd be confused as she sees the stomach just slice open and the snake dispel. Naruto had used a bunch of swift clones to basically disperse and shock and hopefully cut the snake as he falls out confused. He says, that was the first time I shocked myself, as he continues to struggle to get to his feet. Sasuke and Sakura, who had finally gotten their bearings back, would tell Naruto, "Get over here, you idiot," as he jump over. They would quickly start offensively attacking the shinobi they had come across, and it wouldn't be long until a fireball jutsu from Sasuke would finally connect. Naruto had not been able to outspeed the shinobi once, but by him keeping the shinobi busy and Sasuke hitting her from behind would basically end in her skin sort of melting off. And so they'd see another face underneath this one, an older male's one. The male inside's voice starts to change and says, "Well, looks like you figured me out," as he crawls out of the skin like it's a snake shedding. Whatever, he would explain that he is Orochimaru, one of the 3 Sannin, quickly ringing bells in all 3 of the Genin's head. They had heard stories about the Sannin while they were in the academy. The Sannin, the 3 strongest shinobi in the shinobi world, except for a certain few. Whatever, they need to leave. They'd quickly try leaving, but Orochimaru, now unrestricted by the body he was previously in, would quickly demobilize them, knocking Naruto out and even biting Sasuke, leaving some sort of weird mark on his neck. Soon after, he dissolved into the ground, as Naruto would barely be able to wake up just as he left. Naruto would say, "Damn it. Sakura, you take care of Sasuke. I'm gonna go get that proctor." Naruto wouldn't really have his bearings and would fall over multiple times before he gets his footing, because he literally just got knocked out and just stood right back up. He'd quickly use his speed to make his way back to the entrance, and they're in the complete middle of the forest. So it's going to take a long way either to get back to the tower or to get to the entrance. They would then separate, Sakura trying to find a hiding spot underneath a giant tree she found for Sasuke to rest while they wait for Naruto, and Naruto would be on his way to the outside. He would eventually reach the outside and tell Anko that there's a certain slippery bastard inside that calls himself Orochimaru, and as he believes that's a rogue shinobi of the Leaf, and he just almost killed their team. Anko would ask, "What do you mean?" as Naruto would proceed to say, "Well, he gave the Uchiha a hickey and then ran off." Anko would quickly touch her neck, basically freezing for a second, just as she basically focuses chakra into her mouth to let off a loud chakra-empowered whistle. This would alert Anbu, and she'd tell them that Orochimaru is in the Leaf. The 3rd Hokage must be alerted. She then asked Naruto to lead the way to where they found him, and Naruto would quickly take off. As they arrive at the scene, no one is there, and Naruto would say that he has to go check up on his team, while Anko would say that it would be fine. Just get the Uchiha to the tower as quickly as possible. Naruto would start making his way there. On the other hand, to the people he is heading to, Sasuke is laying unconscious while Sakura is trying to defend him from 3 shinobi that had just shown up out of the blue attempting to kill him. She would obviously question this, and they would reveal that they are from the Hidden Sound Village. And as that, from the Hidden Sound Village, they are tasked from their leader, aka Orochimaru, to kill Sasuke, and some shit. They would quickly start bullying Sakura as she's on the point of basically fainting when a certain green person just pops up in front of her. "Sakura, my sweet, I am here. I, Rock Lee, have saved you." As he basically gushes over her and she says, "Ew, but thank you, Lee. I really needed your help." As quickly, she would also notice standing in the trees Neji and Tenten, 2 people not even closely interested in helping them. Now, they would proceed to quickly start ganging up on Lee. Lee would not be at a disadvantage at all, and Tenten and Neji would refuse to help when a certain someone would wake up. Sasuke, now bursting out in a purple aura, marks spreading all over his body, would viciously attack these sound shinobi, basically refusing Lee of his help. Lee would obviously let him since this isn't his fight, they already have the scrolls. Sasuke would almost kill all of the shinobi, but would quickly be stopped by Sakura basically grabbing onto him and begging him. Sasuke would finally let up and grab a scroll from one of their pockets, telling Sakura they're going to head to the tower. Sakura would agree as one of the sound genin would stand up. He has some sort of gauntlet device. As he throws his hand towards Sasuke, attempting to throw off some sort of sound wave attack, he'd be kicked in the side of the head by the knuckle-headed ninja himself, Naruto. Naruto would say, "Hey, sorry I'm late. Y'all guys okay?" as he sees Sasuke's curse mark regressing. Sasuke would fall to the ground saying, "Took you long enough. Now, let's get to the tower." Naruto would look up and see Lee and would already know what went down. He'd nod respectfully, basically thanking Lee for the assist, not wanting to say anything because he knows it would basically trigger up Sasuke's temperament, and together the two teams would head back. When they get there, they would basically see Gara. Gara would have been there for hours and would actually have made it there in the first 3, which is an almost new record. They'd be really impressed, but whatever. On the wall it says open the. It has a riddle, and they decipher the riddle to basically open both scrolls at the same time. As they do so, out puff Uruka. Uruka would then start shouting at them about how they shouldn't open the scroll until they have both, because this would eliminate them from the Chunin exams. When Naruto would basically just point down, and Uruka would see that they do have both scrolls. He'd be confused, questioning how they got them this fast, and Naruto would look over to the other team and say, "It's thanks to them, so whatever." He'd also be holding an unconscious Sasuke at this point, saying that they need a room for Sasuke because he's in pretty bad condition. Iruka would show them the way, as he'd also see that Lee's group also has 2 scrolls, so he'd allow them to enter as well. He'd go write them off as having passed his test, and they should take some sleep. Now we'd have a 3-day time skip. After the 3 days had shortly passed, all the genin that had passed the test would have gathered in the central room, where a giant statue in hand would be held. Now that they are in this room, the third Hokage would start explaining the meanings of this test. He would explain that too many people have passed this test to go on to the finale, so they're going to have a preliminary. Everyone that wins their fights would move on to the finale. For sake, I'm just going to go over Naruto's fight with Kiba instead of every single fight, because more or less, basically what happens is Sasuke wins, Kabuto gives up, I think, Sakura ties, Lee gets put in the hospital, Neji beats the shit out of Hinata. Naruto would claim that he's going to destroy Neji in the finals, and yeah, so Naruto would be put up against the one Kiba and Izuka. Naruto and Kiba's fight would be a lot different from what it was in canon. Even though Kiba knows that Naruto has immense speed, he is still really cocky that he's going to win, because Naruto in the academy is still not all that much in this What If universe. So, how this is basically going to start is that Naruto is going to just stand there. He's going to literally wait until Kiba makes the first move. And Mr. Cocky Bastard himself, Kiba, would not take too long to perform such. He would quickly attack Naruto with a double fang over fang after using a man-beast mimicry, man-beast clone transformation, or man-beast clone, whatever the fuck you want to call it, where Akamaru basically turns into Kiba. Can't remember the name, sorry. They'd use a double fang over fang and start attacking Naruto. Naruto would effortlessly be able to dodge this, which would really confuse Kiba. And Naruto would basically just stare at Gara most of the fight. He'd barely even pay any attention to Kiba. So Kiba was like, "You cocky bastard, look at me. I'm gonna destroy you, and then I'm gonna become Hokage." As Naruto would just shrug it off, basically just staring at Gara because Gara just defeated Lee the fight before, and in this timeline Lee did go first instead of Naruto. So he's literally just death staring Gara. He wants at Gara because if Gara was able to out defend Lee's speed, well, goddamn. So Naruto would effortlessly just put his attention on Kiba and just blitz him. I mean, like, appear in front of him and just knock his shit out with basically Neji and Tenten, who are still there, just being like kerfuffle. They did not know what the fuck just happened. So now we're going to move on to what happens after. Sakura had lost, Sasuke had not. Kakashi wants to train Naruto and Sasuke, but he was informed by the third Hokage before this that Jiraiya is back in the village and that he wants to take care of Naruto. Kakashi would even offer to train Naruto because he basically told the third Hokage that Jiraiya could join them, but he's still planning on teaching Naruto unless Naruto wants to be taught by Jiraiya alone. He'd offered to Naruto, but Naruto would immediately deny, saying he's gonna just spend it on meditation trying to figure out his perception, because at this point he's not too worried about increasing his speed, he's more worried about controlling his speed. So he would basically get given a ticket by Kakashi that tells him to go to the hot springs and sit there and meditate. It's always a lot quieter there, so he'd actually decide to do it. On the other hand, Kakashi had also sealed away Sasuke's curse mark and would also be training Sasuke to do the Chidori within this time, all that type of shit. And let's get into the main time skip. Naruto would make his way to the hot springs, and as he got to the front desk, he'd ask if anyone else is in the hot springs, and the receptionist or the desk lady would answer that there's only an old man in there, nothing that would be a bother, and obviously that men go on one side, women go blah blah. She'd explain all that, and Naruto would think that, hey, an old man, he'd probably be able to get some sort of training in, so whatever, he'd be able to meditate. He would go in, and as he does, he'd immediately see an old man with long silverish white hair standing there peeking on the girls. He would make his way in, kind of just going into the water and basically telling him, hey old man, you're not supposed to be doing that. Jiraiya would say, hey kid, go away, as the girls would notice Jiraiya peeking. So they'd obviously scream, and Jiraiya would say, look at that kid, you caused them to see me, as he turns around and sees Naruto and goes, Naruto? And Naruto would ask him if Naruto knows him, and Jiraiya would just respond with, I, Jiraiya, the great toad sage of Mount Nebo, and starts his whole rant, basically ending with Naruto saying, well, whatever old man, just shut up, I'm trying to meditate, as he goes into a meditative position. Jiraiya and him would have some back and forth conversation, and Jiraiya would say that he's one of the 3 legendary Sanins, prompting Naruto to tell Jiraiya what happened with Sasuke. Jiraiya would be interested and offers to train Naruto. Naruto would ask him, what could you really teach me? I have a special Kekkei Genkai that no one else in the Leaf has, Swift Release. And this would catch Jiraiya's eye, because obviously this was Minato's Kekkei Genkai. Jiraiya would start stroking his chin and say, actually, I had a student with Swift Release before. Naruto would jump up and say, what? Are you serious? Who was it? As Jiraiya would look to where the Great Snow Mountains barely shine over the gate and says, well, it was the 4th Hokage. How do you think he was that fast? This would intrigue Naruto even more, and Naruto would quickly actually go with Jiraiya and actually start training with him. Jiraiya would ask him everything he knows, and he'd explain he knows basic chakra control like water walking, tree walking. For some reason, his perception slows down time around him when he goes into the state, as he calls it, which is basically just him activating his swift release chakra. As Jiraiya would say that meditation might help, but how Minato did it back in the day was he used to train harshly while trying to focus. Maybe you should do that too, kid. So Naruto would obviously take the advice. He'd start training like Jiraiya told him to. Jiraiya would also be there overseeing it. Jiraiya would see that Naruto has a great grasp of how to control swift release, but he can't closely do what Minato could. So he'd tell Naruto to take a break on that. How about he learns another jutsu that he knows? Naruto would question it, and Jiraiya would explain. He would have Naruto summon this, basically sign this little contract in blood, as he basically shows Naruto the hand signs for the summoning jutsu. Naruto would quickly learn it before actually putting chakra into it and think that he has it down. He'd perform it a few times, first summoning basically a tadpole, second a tadpole with legs, third an actual little frog, and now he's thinking, how much chakra should I actually put in? And Jiraiya would basically scream out, "You need a lot more chakra than that, kid." As Naruto just says, "Okay." He slams his hands together, channeling as much chakra as he could, and then quickly switches into the hand signs. Slamming his hand on the ground in a giant cloud of smoke. As it starts clearing, he sees a toad underneath him. It would be colored cyan and turquoise. This is Gamahiro, as Jiraiya will point out. Gamahiro doesn't really talk that much and is commonly referred to as Hero, which is what Jiraiya would say. He'd say, "Damn, kid, you summoned a hero right off the bat? I was kind of hoping for Gamabunta, but here's a good place to start." Gamahiro would look at Jiraiya and basically just shrug his shoulders like, "Yo, what am I supposed to do?" And Jiraiya would explain, "Okay, Gamahiro, since he didn't summon the big guy like the rest of us, I'm gonna guess you're gonna get your first official contract. So how about you give him a test?" Gamahiro would basically just have the same test as Chief Toad for this example, aka Gamabunta for those of you who do not know who Chief Toad is. So basically what would proceed to happen is Naruto would actually stick to Gamahiro for the next 24 hours, with Gamahiro giving him the contract at the end of the day. Naruto would agree only to summon him if needed, and Gamahiro would poof away. Jiraiya would explain that Naruto now has a summoning contract, which is one of the more rare type of contracts within the summoning world, because usually you'd either have the boss or a smaller one, and not necessarily one of the semi-bosses like Gamahiro, because most of the time you need to intentionally want to summon him. Jiraiya wouldn't necessarily know why Gamahiro was summoned, but he remembers something similar happening to Minato. Minato was able to summon 3 toads actually off the bat, being Gamahiro, Gamabunta, and the third one whose name I can never actually remember, the polite one, sorry. So basically what would happen now is that Naruto would have yet another month to train because he got this down so quickly. Jiraiya would think to teach him taijutsu, but with Naruto's pure speed and at this level of Chunin exams, he wouldn't actually need that offensive of taijutsu. So he decided to teach him another jutsu. As Naruto would come back the next day to once again train with Jiraiya, Jiraiya would show off his signature jutsu, the Rasengan. Naruto would slowly progress through the steps, and I'm gonna say in about a week he'd actually get down all the steps. Jiraiya would try and get him to actually perform the Rasengan, and for about another week he'd actually work on trying to do it without a clone. He's not going to have clones this one since he only has Swift clones. Naruto would eventually get it down, and Jiraiya, seeing as there's 2 weeks over, would ask Naruto how much control over his Kekkei Genkai he has. Naruto would say that he has sublime control over the Kekkei Genkai itself and some of the jutsu within the Kekkei Genkai, but he cannot perform any jutsu from either wind nor lightning release, which kind of saddens Jiraiya because, like, hey, yo, you got wind and lightning release, but you can't use it? Like, that's a waste. But whatever. Jiraiya would ask him if he wants to help him test something, and Naruto would be all for it. He'd basically explain since Naruto's body naturally conducts both lightning and wind because of his Kekkei Genkai, he should try basically infusing it into the chakra of the Rasengan, which they'd actually try doing, but obviously it wouldn't work. At the end of the day, what they would have gotten down to was actually Naruto getting an Odama Rasengan down, which is actually pretty impressive. Not to the scale of the normal Shippuden Odama Rasengan, but Odama Rasengan nonetheless. It does a lot more damage than the base Rasengan, and is a pretty It's a pretty stable move, I'd say. So, time skip now over. The Genin are basically forced to come back for the finals. As the remaining participating Genin gather back up after the 1 month time skip, where they had time to train or relax either within the Leaf or at their respective villages, they see the packed stadium of villagers, nobles, and even clansmen as they prepare for what's about to happen. What is about to happen is that they are about to charge straight forward and fight for their place within shinobi society. Be that the rank of Chunin, a special place within their village's military force, or even the private guard of a daimyo. Some might even have malicious intent. Sand Village. But that's what we're here to discover. So, here on Going Out, we shall be going over the events of the last and final test to the Chunin exams. I would like to take a quick break here to say I do apologize if there are any plot holes in the story from here on going forward. Maybe if I retcon something without mentioning it, I do apologize. Since this script is over a year old, there will be some kinks and things that I missed reading it back over. So if something seems out of place or odd, just know I probably missed an intent that I had originally that I probably did not write down. So, if that happens, I do apologize, but let's continue. At face value, everything would seem normal, except for the fact that some of the Genin had realized there must be a reason for why the proctors were changed, since when Hayate had originally introduced himself within the preliminaries, he said he would be the proctor for the third and final exam. But currently standing in his place is Genma, another shinobi from the Leaf. So, some might be suspicious on what happened. Of course, us as fans know that Gekko or Hayate had actually been murdered by the Sand Shinobi Sensei, Baki. And as most of the participants had probably realized, 2 of the other participants are actually missing, that being Sasuke and Dosu. Dosu had also been murdered trying to sneak up on Gara during the 1 month and kill him before he became a problem, but had failed and in turn got himself killed instead. So whoever would have originally faced against Dosu gets a pass on this battle. On the other hand, we see that Sasuke is still currently training to the last second with Kakashi, and at this very moment is probably heading here. But nonetheless, the fights must start. So the current proctor, Hayate, would call out for the 2 first participants. The first fight of the Chunin exams final, Naruto Uzumaki versus Neji Hyuga. And as the 2 arrive down on the battlefield and face each other, before Hayate would say begin, Neji couldn't help himself but to let some smug comments slip. Naruto would not take any of this to head, as he knows Neji is already a pre-existing dangerous opponent, and letting him get inside of his head will be a hassle. If Neji is even close to the power level Lee was on, Naruto knows he has to take this fully seriously. And how to take this more seriously than going all out from the start. Naruto would start off with an extreme speed kick right to the side of Neji. But Neji's dojutsu allows him to keep up with Naruto, at least in terms of movement. He would be able to block it as he would skirt around the field, but he had actually landed a successful Jugen strike with this block on Naruto's leg. Naruto would feel one of the chakra points in his leg close, as he can no longer channel chakra through that point. He would charge his chakra into that point as much as he could, as it will finally start flowing once again. If he keeps getting hit like that, opening chakra points are going to be way too hard. So he better make use of his shadow clones, or at least his swift clones. He would swiftly create 3 clones, I know, I want to die, as he would once again proceed to attack Neji, this time from separate directions. This bout would go on for a while until all clones are in proximity of Neji. He would then find quite a resourceful way of spinning. He would then disrupt all 3 clones and almost hit the real Naruto. He had just performed the 64 palm rotation, or the palm rotation, I apologize, as not only Naruto, but the members of the audience and Hyuga clan are all shocked. Not only will Neji proceed to do the 64 palms, which is a technique usually reserved for the nobles of the clan or the main house of the clan, which also applies for the palm rotation. No one taught it to him, which at least means that he figured it out from watching others do it. Neji truly is the prodigy of the Hyuga clan. Naruto, after being stunned for a mere moment, would proceed to run around as he creates 10 clones, the max amount that he can create, as they would all once again charge at Neji, this time having somewhat of a medium range. They would then proceed to throw kunai after kunai as Neji would unleash the other technique, or the alternate technique that he had learned, the 64 palms, once again shocking the Hyuga clan members as they thought, once again, that he would not have accomplished something like this. Whilst in Naruto's mind, this means nothing. It could merely be a string of Jugen strikes. So he would continue his onslaught. He would proceed to make 2 more clones as him and his 2 clones would surround Neji. They would try and take opportunistic strikes and even use something like the Gale Palm or maybe the Lightning Arc to try and throw Neji off. And obviously one of these would eventually hit. This is when a clone would go in close and Neji would get his first strikes off, at least in this specific clash. But this is where something strange happens. One of Naruto's clones who had gotten behind Neji would leap in as they try and strike. Neji would not have been the wiser until the clone lowered closer to the ground. Neji would then spin around in a palm rotation, bursting both that clone, the other clone that remains, and Naruto away. So, 2 clones dispersed, and this memory would rush to Naruto's head. He's finally able to put it together. The Byakugan has a weak spot. He can't determine exactly where it is, but as per how the shadow clone had dove, he could at least assume that it is somewhere near the nape of the neck. And this is where Naruto would put his new plan into action. He would berate Neji with 9 shadow clones as he would secretly create another shadow clone to run and circle around Neji. For if they could keep his focus on them, it might cloud his vision for long enough for this clone to get into a general vicinity or widespread of the weak spot, since we know the further the distance, the larger the opening. So, the entire theory is that the clone would then proceed to throw a kunai at Neji's weak spot, or at least his blind spot. And that's pretty much what would happen. Naruto would see as the kunai flies from the edge of his vision and almost hits Neji in the nape of the neck. He didn't even realize it, but he did do a palm rotation once again to get all these clones off of him. He's running pretty low on chakra and didn't even notice the kunai coming towards him, meaning Naruto was right. There is a massive blind spot within the vision of the Byakugan. So, as long as he uses that to his advantage, he should be able to win this. Chakra-wise, he's still better off than Neji, since his clones hadn't been dispersing into swift release, or at least swift damage, as they would usually release these wind blades and lightning and all that type of stuff to both slice and damage the opponent. But instead, he had been keeping as much chakra as possible, since that is one of the advantages he has over a lot of his current opponents. So, now Naruto would proceed to use this incoming information and would try to use the opening, the blind spot that he knows Neji has. He would dash around in his insane speed as he knows Neji can't fully keep up. He can merely predict what Naruto would do next with a vision of his Byakugan. But this is where Naruto gets into that blind spot and lunges directly at Neji. Even the 1 second Naruto was late to get out of Neji's blind spot, it would be enough for Neji to realize Naruto had found it, and thus he would create a palm rotation dome. Naruto would be able to stop just short of getting hit full force. as sweat would drop. He now knows this is no longer an option. Neji had figured out his plan, and Neji would even reveal this. So, I see you found the Byakugan's weakness. Well, that's what this palm rotation is for. It covers for that weakness. Obviously, the smug Neji, which he is, would proceed to go on a rant about how destiny hasn't chosen Naruto, that Kekkei Genkai will go to uselessness as he was never destined for greatness. He was destined to be alone and in the dumps, and so on and so forth. Naruto would strongly disagree with this, and for the first time this fight, he would go back to the normal Naruto we know, biting back as he usually does. He would say that it does not matter what Neji does, he will break through. And how he'll break through? Well, this is how. He creates two clones and immediately charges towards Neji at full speed. Neji knows his only hope is the palm rotation, as Naruto pulls out a Rasengan. The closer he gets, the more Naruto thinks, and the more time slows down in his head. He figures out if he creates the Rasengan in an opposite propulsion, or at least in an opposite rotation, he should be able to disband Neji's dome. And that's what he does. In his weird slow time mindset, he would clash with Neji's dome, as it would disperse a small place within the dome. As Naruto's hand and Rasengan slip through, it starts to fade. That's when Naruto has the thought, since as he does clash with the dome, it starts shooting out like needles. Naruto realizes in this exact moment what was wrong with what him and Jiraiya were doing to add swift release to the Rasengan. They were trying to add swift release to the existing form of the Rasengan. What they should be doing instead is changing the shape of the Rasengan to match the nature. And in this case, he remembers Kakashi. Kakashi did something similar with lightning release and was able to release it in full force by shooting it in frontwards direction and containing it around his hand. Naruto, on the other hand, won't be using this. He would be using a similar action to the combination of Gale Palm and Lightning Arc, as his Rasengan would spike out, shoot, and fly towards Neji, something like spinning lightning. It was very odd to witness, as Neji almost saw it in slow motion himself, his dojutsu remembering every scene. As it clashes with him, it leaves a massive gash over his chest and shoulder. His arm falls limp. One of his eyes close and his dojutsu deactivates. He is currently panting as electricity bounces off of him. He is stunned. He can't move. He tries to say something, but Naruto appears in front of him. Don't say anything. Just sleep. As Naruto hits him on the side of the neck with a straight hand, Neji falls unconscious. Hayate declares the match in Naruto's favor as the medical shinobi are called out to look after Neji. Naruto would raise his hand and ask if they can check out the injuries on his legs, since when the dome dispersed, it did somewhat go around his body, but his legs still got hit. And it might have even hit a few muscles and maybe even a few chakra points. So if he wants to save up on chakra, the medical shinobi would definitely help. So he would be literally cheered off the stage as everyone was impressed by that demonstration. Jiraiya, who was secretly in the audience, would prepare to leave as he is proud of his student. He had figured something out that Jiraiya himself would have never. But as he gets to the door, he says to himself, "Wait, how did he do that? I wasn't able to get a clear sign or vision on how it happened," as he would rush back into the stadium looking for Naruto. Naruto would not have returned to the waiting area, but instead went with the medical shinobi, so Jiraiya himself has a hard time finding Naruto. So from here on, he would scour the stadium to try and find his student. While this is happening, Hayate would call for the next match, Sasuke Uchiha versus Gara. Gara of the Sand would make his way down to the stadium, but there would be no reply from Sasuke Uchiha. Hayate would say the least he could do is move this battle up to the final fight, but if Sasuke still doesn't show, it goes in Gara's favor. This is when the next fight, which is Shino versus Dosu, or Shino versus Kankuro, I believe, would happen. but Kankuro, as per normal, would give up or forfeit this match as he wants to retain his skills a secret for when the invasion begins. On the other hand, Dosu, who is not present, would be not put in Shino's place since this is Shino's victory. On the other hand, there is still one fight before the Sasuke versus Gara fight, being the Shikamaru versus Tamari bout. This bout would probably go similar to canon, with there being mostly mid to long range combat, with Shikamaru and Tamari getting each other on the fence multiple times. Shikamaru almost being skewered by Tamari's fan multiple times in a row, but Tamari getting stuck in Shikamaru's shadow inevitably. This would lead to what seems to be Shikamaru's victory, as he would raise his hand saying that he forfeits. Obviously, his opponent Tamari wouldn't be too happy about this, as the victory is now hers. Hayate calls it out. Shikamaru Nara versus Tamari. Tamari wins. She would question Shikamaru, with him only replying that his chakra was about to run out, and he'd rather lose this fight than spend a month in the hospital for chakra exhaustion. She would laugh as she spun her fan back onto her back, saying that she likes him, at least in a form of "I respect you" way. On the other hand, the crowd is cheering, since even though this ended with a forfeit, the fight itself was amazing. Everyone enjoyed seeing this beautiful bout, and now we move on to the finale, or at least the final of the preliminaries, or whatever you want to call this startup. Sasuke Uchiha versus Gara. Gara would make his way down to the arena once again, as Sasuke is called upon multiple times, and as the final call for Sasuke Uchiha goes out, in a swirl of leaves, Kakashi Hatsuki and Sasuke Uchiha appear. And even upon appearing, something is immediately noticeable. Sasuke's Sharingan had progressed to 2 Tomo, as it is already blazing. And on the other hand, his look had also changed some. His hair is slightly longer, and his previously blue clothes are now completely black. There would be some cheering from the audience, and even Naruto sticking his head out of the medical window to be able to watch the fight, since this would truly intrigue him. On the other hand, we all know how this Sasuke versus Gara fight goes. Sasuke would show feats of extreme speed, not even close to that of Naruto's, but with the combination of ninjutsu, he's actually able to put Gara on the fence. Naruto, seeing this, who had originally wished that Gara would win, of course without hurting Sasuke to an extreme degree, he wanted to fight him. But seeing Sasuke's progression, Naruto wouldn't mind if Sasuke won this. This might be a fun fight for him. Who's faster? Whose techniques are better? Rasengan or Chidori? That's at least what Naruto sees. On the other hand, this would still end with the Genjutsu falling, as Gara would run off on his rampage. Sasuke, as per normal, would pretty quickly snap out and go after him. On the other hand, Naruto would actually be helped this time by Jiraiya breaking out of the Genjutsu. He'd say, "Hey kid, this is where you were. Someone casted a Genjutsu over the arena, so I'ma go check that out. You should probably go after your friend, since that other guy looked like he just went insane. After this, you should meet up with me. I want to know what you did to fix the Rasengan issue." As Jiraiya would poof into a cloud of smoke. It seems that it had actually been a shadow clone. Naruto would frantically look around, slightly dazed, as he would see some of his friends in the middle of the arena. Sakura and Shikamaru had been immediately awakened like usual, as they would help everyone else. And as usual, they would then proceed to go after Sasuke. The Sasuke chase would probably go no different, as Naruto might just arrive at Sasuke's location mere moments earlier. Everyone that have fought everyone initially would still go down, as in Shikamaru fighting off against the basically sound tuning / jonin to only be saved by Asuma as he almost faints, and the rest of the shinobi facing off against the Sand siblings. On the other hand, Naruto would arrive to Sasuke's location to see him being thrown around like a wet rag. But before Sasuke goes unconscious, he would see Naruto stopping Gara's hand, as Naruto would land a kick straight to Gara's face. Gara's defense had seemingly dropped since his transformation started. He is currently in a halfway state between his normal self and Shikaku. This is when it would click in Naruto's mind. He's a Jinchuriki. Naruto would then relentlessly begin to attack Gara, but nevertheless, this actually speeds up the process of the Shikaku transformation. And like usual, Naruto would be forced into a situation where he has to use his summoning. At this point, Sasuke is basically pushed back up to a tree, watching the Naruto versus Gara exchange. When Gara transforms, Sasuke winces in pain as he thinks, "I can't die like this. I still need to kill Itachi," as he coughs up some blood. But when his eyes open once again, he sees Naruto on top of a giant toad, smoke clearing out of the air as a sword is drawn from its sheath, cleaving through Shikaku's belly. It would reassemble as he hits himself in said belly to somewhat shoot out wind-like bullets. As these giant-sized bullets fly across the sky, Gamahiro could not help but to dodge it. This exchange was getting on Naruto's nerves. The more the fight continued, the more jutsu were thrown. Both Gamahiro and Naruto were running low on chakra because not only of this exchange, but the immense amount of energy it takes to get around it. Gamahiro would finally talk. "Naruto, I need to tell you something." Naruto would be all ears. He said, "Hurry it up, because if it's not useful, we might die here." Gamahiro would explain in short and exact words that he himself had some form of Toad Kekkei Genkai. It works mainly off of nature energy, but it works similar to Naruto's swift release. By absorbing chakra from the surrounding area, he's able to increase his speeds, but at a point he becomes immobile. So if they were to do it, they would have to win in that exact moment. This isn't exactly swift release, but it is speed increasing. After comes a stun. Naruto would have a suggestion though. If we need to land exact sharp points of attacks, maybe we should assume a different form. Gamahiro would ask for an explanation, with Naruto suggesting that they use a combination of the transformation jutsu to turn themselves into the Nine Tails. The Nine Tails has a perfectly lean body that could land them some clean hits. It has claws and fangs, so they should be able to do things they won't normally be able to do. And since he has now 4 legs instead of 2 legs and 2 arms, he should be able to maneuver with the speed much better. Gamahiro would agree as it would transpire. Sasuke, still sitting against the tree, would see this, and would say to himself, "Naruto has already tapped into the power of the Nine Tails." He would cough up some more blood as he would say, "How could I let myself fall behind this far?" More blood would leave him as his vision starts to blur, and he passes out. On the other hand, Naruto and Gamahiro now start the procedure. Gamahiro starts using all the nature energy he has stored up as he starts flying across the battlefield. Shikaku would make comment on, "Oh, Nine Tails! QB, I haven't seen you in..." He couldn't even finish years as he gets slapped across the face, the marks clearly indicating it was a claw scratch, as he gets flung across the field from the opposite direction. "This speed! The Nine Tails was never able to do this," Shikaku would scream out as he lets off wind bullets in every direction. Naruto and Gamahiro wouldn't falter, as Gamahiro would end his motion by grabbing Shikaku. This is where the freeze takes place. He is currently stunned. Naruto wouldn't let this get to him though, as the transformation breaks. Gamahiro is now clamped onto Shikaku as Naruto jumps over, hitting Gara straight in the face. Gara would wake up, but the transformation wouldn't yet fall, and this is where our initial Takano Jutsu would happen. Naruto and Gara would have a back and forth, with Gara trying to say that Naruto doesn't know how it is, but Naruto explaining that he knows exactly how it is. He had no one. Gara had people. There's still people that care for him. His brother, his sister. Just because his dad had tried to kill him doesn't mean that no one cares about him. He has people that he should protect, since as long as there are people to protect, there is something to live for. And as Naruto continues, Gara proceeds to see something. Every person that has ever cared about Naruto and every person Naruto has ever cared about. He would see each of them appear behind Naruto as they push him forward, with Naruto walking up to a child Gara, helping him up, and embracing him in a hug. This would be enough for both Gamahiro to dispel and for Shikaku-san to fall into each other, as Naruto and Gara on top of the sand slowly fall to the floor. They both now lay there chakra exhausted and in a state of panic, as Gara would say, "Your name's Naruto Uzumaki, right?" With Naruto saying, "Bet you I am, and I'm gonna be the Hokage," as he pumps his fist up into the air, with Gara saying, "Yes. Then I guess I'll be the Kazekage," as both of them fade into unconsciousness. At this point, we switch to an alternate perspective. We see Jiraiya and the third Hokage facing off against Orochimaru. Jiraiya asks one question to his former teammate. "Are you prepared, Orochimaru?" With Orochimaru giving off a laugh. Hiruzen would step back and say, "You two can't seriously be willing to fight, right? You're teammates. You should be working together." As Orochimaru would give his ever so loved Slither speech about the only thing important is life, and without life there is only death, and what he's doing is to gain infinite life, and so on and so forth, resulting in a confirmed battle between Hiruzen, Jiraiya, and Orochimaru. It would start off with Hiruzen and Jiraiya being fully confident they could easily take out Orochimaru, since Jiraiya on his own, and similar to Hiruzen, would probably be able to do this alone. Orochimaru would at first be kind of nervous, dodging blows, until he could finally end a string of hand signs. And as he does, coffins start emerging from the ground. 1, 2, they're numbered. But why? As the third one comes up and the kanji for 4 becomes visible, Hiruzen would weave hand signs as fast as possible to stop the coffin's emergence. Hiruzen would scream out, "You fool! How dare you bring back the Hokage?" with Jiraiya trying to land a last-minute hit. But as he does, the coffins burst open, with both a wooden dragon and a water dragon erupting respectively. As they come from the coffins and cross each other, they would block Jiraiya's path as he would jump back. Hiruzen now knows they are faced with the first and second Hokages. Hiruzen would waste no time, declaring that Jiraiya should go after the first while he goes after the second, since he knows his sensei's moveset like the back of his hand. If they work together, they should be able to take out the two Kage easily and move on to Orochimaru. Jiraiya would laugh, saying, "Calling two gods easy. This is going to be fun, sensei," as he would run along, forming hand signs, what seems to be for a fire jutsu. But instead, what emerges is a liquid. This would confuse the first Hokage, Hashirama, as he had known the kanji, or at least hand signs, for fire, as he stands confused. He was prepared to block a wood attack of his own and opt in for taijutsu when he saw it, but this confirms it nonetheless. He would then throw his wood jutsu, which is an emergence of wood pillars coming from all directions to try and crush his opponent whilst he's talking. "How could you use a water jutsu? That won't do anything against me, you fool. You must use fire." But what he didn't realize is the liquid now lined the trees. Jiraiya would say, "Who said I wasn't?" as he would release his hand signs, fire pumping out of his lungs and mouth onto the trees. They would quickly set ablaze as they would follow along the wood, coming across to Hashirama. But nevertheless, Hashirama would jump away, since this isn't that much of a problem, only to be knocked towards Jiraiya. As he's knocked towards, he would turn to see a Hiruzen clone having hit him with the adamantium staff, or King Enma. As he would turn back to Jiraiya, he would be hit by a giant rotating force. He's hit into a barrier with Jiraiya on top of him once again, apologizing for what he just did to the first Hokage, as he runs away. Hashirama would say, "Don't run now, you fool. He'll make me attack you from behind." As Jiraiya would say, "Not now, first Hokage.
you're done for. As Hashirama would look down on his chest, a seal spreading across his body. Orochimaru would see this and say, "No, I can't let this happen." Alternatively, as this was happening, Hiruzen was having a conversation with his sensei. His sensei, or Tobirama Senju, would have asked how the leaf has been doing. Has it been doing good? Has he been doing good? How about as Hiruzen would stop him, the Uchiha clan were wiped out. This would leave a stun in Tobirama, as he at a point had hated the Uchiha, but he had let that pass as it was a grudge held towards Madara and his brothers, not the entirety of the clan. The Leaf had lost a great asset, but thankfully they have powerful shinobi, one capable of facing off against the first Hokage, which he'd say, "You have become a powerful shinobi, Hiruzen," as he would look back to see Hashirama thrown into a wall after one of Hiruzen's shadow clones had escaped his view. And so have your students. It looks like this world doesn't need us anymore. For only Orochimaru to go through hand signs to stop the reanimation jutsu, in hopes of not losing the first Hokage's soul. This would unforeseeably undo both reanimations, as both of them are released. Orochimaru would now stand fearful, as he does not know what to do. He does not have any sacrifices for his summons, as you could so call it, so he needs to get away. He would scream, "Now's the time!" as he goes through hand signs really fast, casting a summoning jutsu. Jiraiya would have done the same thing, as he would have seen this forecoming, but Orochimaru's would take place first, and as the barrier around them falls due to his vocal signs, the giant Manda is summoned. But just in the nick of time, Jiraiya was able to summon the iron-bellied toad, which would dispel almost immediately as Manda is summoned on top of it. But at least him and his sensei Hiruzen had both survived. Now comes for one thing. He'd say, "Jump back, sensei," as he goes through the hand signs once again, summoning Gamabunta. Gamabunta and Manda could be seen from the distance, being observed by Naruto before he attacks Gara, and obviously other individuals throughout the village, like Kakashi, Guy, Asuma, and so on and so forth. This would lead to a clash once again between Gamabunta and Manda, something that seems like a fated battle of sorts, something that will always go on for as long as their contracts exist. The toad versus the snake. But nevertheless, Jiraiya would take this to his advantage. He would have Gamabunta throw as much toad well around the area as possible, obviously in different spurts, and Jiraiya would use Gamabunta and his own offensive jutsu to try and get Orochimaru between some of these splurts or even on top of them so that he could then set them on fire using his fire jutsu. But obviously this isn't needed, as Hiruzen is on the floor and would most likely give that type of support to Jiraiya from down below, with the occasional hit on Manda. But nevertheless, I would say this match would most likely have gone in Jiraiya's way, and just as I could predict so, probably Orochimaru would too. Thus, it would cause a retreat. But for him to retreat, he must first reach the ground, since he is currently aboard Manda. But not for long, as he would jump down. As he closes in on the ground, he would sporadically be thrown over it, as he would slam into Manda so hard that Manda would be dispelled. On the other hand, Orochimaru is forced to leave his own skin, having taken insufferable damage. As he leaves his own body, he sees a man in pure green, covered in a green aura, skin turning red, as he hears, "Sixth gate!" But this wouldn't last long, as he would be hit again and again and again. He would be forced to mold his skin multiple times, as he's finally out of chakra. He'd stand on the ground looking up, as his teammate Jiraiya would say, "This is over. Guy, hold him," as Guy would grab Orochimaru around either arm. Jiraiya would go through hand signs as he says, "Chakra Destruction Seal." He grabs Orochimaru's chest and starts turning the seal, as it starts spreading across his arms. As it goes down his body, he is grabbed from below. Headhunter? He would think, "No, this is a transportation jutsu," as Orochimaru fades into the ground and disappears away. Jiraiya would go over and use a Rasengan on a tree, destroying it completely, saying, "Damn it, we let him get away, again!" Obviously, he would be heated, but nevertheless, there is someone else there. Both Kakashi, Guy, and Hiruzen are all currently present. Guy would feel bad that he couldn't hold Orochimaru, but he turned into like a mud-like substance, so there's nothing he could have done. Kakashi would be comforting Guy when Hiruzen would go up to Jiraiya, saying that, "Don't worry, Jiraiya. Don't be so hard on yourself. At least his arms don't have access to chakra. For now. There are only 3 people that know how to break this jutsu after all. Me, you, and Tsunade. That's unless Orochimaru finds a way to do it himself, which I doubt. So now, we wait. Maybe." That's when Jiraiya says, "What if he goes after Tsunade, sensei? You don't understand." As he would run off. Wait. As he hears an explosion. He sees Ninetales waving as he says, "I'll be right back. That must be Naruto." As he would go jumping across the trees along with Kakashi. They would see countless shinobis, like Shikamaru being saved by Asuma from the shinobi he was facing, Kankuro and Tamari suffering their own defeats, as they would come across an unconscious Naruto and an unconscious Gara. Sasuke would be hunched up to a tree, just repeating the last things they said. So they became friends. He just defeated an opponent by becoming their friend? How? As this would confuse everyone within earshot. Sasuke would start laughing as he says, "This is insane. He just made him his friend. How the hell does that make sense?" With Sasuke standing up, going over to Naruto, everyone would still be watching. Sasuke yet to be aware of their presence. He would kick Naruto, and then he would jump over on top of Gara, saying, "Both these idiots just made friends, and now they're sleeping? Both of them should be dead by all means." With him finally being interrupted and grabbed by Kakashi. Guy would then run up to Naruto, being like, "Jiraiya, is he okay?" Jiraiya checking his seal just to make sure. He'd say, "It seems that Ninetales didn't come from the seal." When Gara would hear this, he would slightly awaken, saying it was a giant toad in a transformation. He would turn his head as he asked, Is he okay?" With Jiraiya saying, "One Tails. Yes, Naruto should be alright. He's still breathing. But first we must get him to a hospital, and you to the Ambu." As he would let off a loud whistle, multiple Ambu would arrive on the scene to see an unconscious Gara. Sasuke would still be mumbling about how they became friends and all that, giving Jiraiya the sense of Naruto having defused the situation, possibly having defused Gara. So he would tell them to just take him to the hospital and keep him under surveillance there. He'll sort the rest of this out. As it seemingly fades to black. Days later, Naruto would awaken in a hospital bed. He would first look to his left as he felt a weight on his left leg. Who he sees is a blonde-haired girl in purple clothing. At first it seemed a little odd, but the more he thought about it, he was like, "Ino?" He would reach for her as she would say something in her sleep. "I really hope the dummy is okay," as she would begin to snore. He would at first giggle as he would look to the other side and see Gara. He'd say, "Oh, you're awake too, Gara," as Gara would finally acknowledge Naruto being awake. He would say that, "Oh, you're probably wondering what I'm doing here. I had requested to be moved to a room with you since when I'm next to you I can sleep." Naruto and Gara would then have a conversation about the One Tail's influence on Gara's life, and Gara finally feels like he could get all this off of his chest. And ever so many times, Naruto would remind him that there are people that care about him. Obviously, he himself, and he doesn't doubt that those two, as he points over to Gara's bed, being Tamari and Kankuro sleeping on his lap, saying, "They still care about you." With Gara just giggling, saying, "So does that girl. She's been here almost every day. The only time she leaves is when the one with the black hair and the fat one come."
with him laughing, saying, "Oh, Shikamaru and Choji come here too?" With him smiling, saying, "They've been the only ones coming here except those two senseis of yours." Naruto would smile, saying that he's proud that some people care about him, as he would put his hand on Ino's head, letting his fingers run through her hair. She would then awaken to this sensation. She would first look up, saying, "Naruto, I like you," as she would then realize what was happening. Unlike usual, she was not in a dream, as her face would turn red and she would turn all spazzy. She would jump up saying, "Look who you're touching, idiot!" As Naruto would laugh saying, "Oh, I thought you liked me. So I'm a likable idiot then." With Ino growing even more red, she'd say, "Yeah, I kind of let it slip, didn't I?" With Naruto only laughing once again. Ino would say, "Whatever," as she would just jump onto the bed next to Naruto, hearing a loud, "Ow!" from Naruto, as he hadn't been completely healed. He still had many sore muscles, when they would both just hear a laugh. You would assume that it's Gara, but no, it is someone standing in the window. It is Jiraiya. He said, "I knew you had it in you, kid. I always knew you would get the ladies." With Naruto cussing and throwing stuff at Jiraiya, telling him to stop being a peeving Tom. This would eventually awaken Kankuro and Tamari, saying, "Oh, so he finally knows?" Looking at Gara, with him only nodding. They would then proceed to leave the room, as Gara would just turn in his bed, pretending to fall asleep. Ino would glare daggers at Jiraiya, as he had just ruined her big moment, with Jiraiya laughing, saying, "Don't worry about it, Tootsie Pops. Could you, with her just saying, "No, I'm staying right here. I've been waiting for this," as she would grab Naruto even tighter than she had been previously. Naruto would look at Jiraiya and say, "Just go ahead, Pervy Sage. I don't mind." With Jiraiya saying, "Okay. So, you see, some of your friends are in the hospital with you. That Lee kid is still in pretty bad condition, and so is Sasuke now. That curse mark really did something to the kid." With Naruto finally jumping up from Ino's grasp, she would then grab his leg, saying, "No, just a moment longer," like the little simp that she is. With Naruto saying, "Ino, just a second. I need to go check on Sasuke and Lee," as he would run, not even asking where their room is. When he would finally bump into a nurse, he'd say, "Sasuke Uchiha and Rock Lee," as she would give the individual room numbers, as she had been attending to them. Naruto would make his way to Lee's room to see Lee up and about, moving around on his hands whilst his legs and back are studded. He'd be like, "Lee, you shouldn't be moving," with Lee obviously responding with the average, "I must keep up my training, or else guys it's as his back would finally start hurting. He would fall over as Guy Sensei or Mike Guy would break through the door saying, "Lee, stop hurting yourself, please!" With Lee and Guy having one of their iconic moments, with Lee saying that he must get stronger. Him losing his legs won't stop him from becoming the strongest shinobi without possessing chakra, ninjutsu, nor genjutsu. With Guy pleading that Lee doesn't hurt himself further. He brings up that Jiraiya had said he would go get Tsunade, the greatest healer in the land, to bring back and heal him. With Lee looking at Guy Sensei going, "Really, Guy Sensei? Did you set this up?" With the guy saying, "Sadly not, Lee, but it's all for you." As they would have, once again, a cry fest. "Lee! Guy Sensei!" As the room would seemingly flood, obviously for comedic effect. At first, Naruto would be relieved that Lee seems to be okay, and he's curious about this Tsunade person. Nevertheless, he still needs to check on Sasuke. He would this time walk over to Sasuke's room, as he would see Sakura crying at Sasuke's bed. He hadn't awakened yet. He had been pretty injured, and he is binded? When he would ask about it, Sakura would yell at him, telling him to back away. "This is your fault. You're the reason he's tied up." With Naruto being confused. He'd want to ask why, but she would just screech like always, when Jiraiya would appear at the door, saying, "Come on, kid, I'll explain," as he drags Naruto away.
He could hear Sakura's cries as he would walk further. As him and Jiraiya close in on the hospital door, Jiraiya would start speaking. After you and that Gara kid fell unconscious, the Uchiha kid attacked both of you whilst you were down. The Gara kid was able to protect you, but had taken more injuries on his own, so we had to sedate the Uchiha since he was a danger to not only others but himself. He had even gotten loose one night and tried to attack the redhead in his sleep, with Naruto saying, "Sasuke? Sasuke wouldn't do anything like that." With them rounding the corner and Ino finally being spotted, Naruto would look at Ino saying, "Is this true?" Ino jumping back saying, "Is what true?" With Naruto knowing that she heard everything. She would give a sigh as she would say, "Yeah, Sakura hasn't left his bed ever since. She seems pretty worried. But it's not your fault, Naruto. He attacked you." Naruto knows that Sasuke is attacking him since Naruto seems superior. Naruto doesn't think himself so, but he knows Sasuke does view it like that. So he has some form of empathy towards Sasuke. As he would say, "No, this is my fault. I should have considered what Sasuke was going through. I did sweep in and take his final blow. But I didn't want him to hurt Gara. He seemed hurt. He seemed like he needed somebody." As he would look at his hand and say, "Like I needed somebody." With Ino grabbing Naruto's hand as he clenches it, saying, "Don't worry, Naruto. We're all here for you now." As Naruto would say, "We?" He would look to see Kakashi, Jiraiya, Ino, Shikamaru, Choji, Kiba, Hinata, Neji, and so many more people from the Chunin exams standing there, all who had awaited his return. They had all been worried and are now satisfied seeing him to be okay. He would look back to Jiraiya and say, "Forget this Tsunade person. Can she help everyone?" With Jiraiya smiling, saying, "That's exactly what I was thinking. Let's go get Tsunade." As they would walk out the hospital. But before it cuts away to the Tsunade retrieval arc, we would see Naruto and Jiraiya being followed as they meet up at the Leaf Village gate. It would take Naruto and Jiraiya quite some time before they had realized they have been followed. In fact, it was such a long time that they had already preceded the gate when they finally heard a voice, noticing that yes, indeed they were being followed. Of course, at first they had their suspicions, but had not connected it to anything. Now that they heard the separate voices, they look back to see members of the Konoha 12 signing out. Of course, there's the small chance of them going on a mission, but they think they know what's going on. They would ask why they're being followed, of course, with the Genin being quick to respond. They would all admit that the reason they're following is for not only everyone else in the village's benefit, people they care about needing the help of Lady Tsunade to be healed, of course, but them wanting to become stronger themselves, and who better of a teacher than Lord Jiraiya himself. At first, he'd be, "Why would I teach all of you?" And instead of any of them jumping in, it would be Naruto to answer. Because I've seen every single one of them work harder than any prodigy would ever. Except for Neji. This would reveal to us the group at hand. The group at hand consists of the entirety of the Konoha 12, apart from Sasuke, Sakura, and Hinata. Neji would reveal that the only reason he is coming along is to make sure that Tsunade makes her way to the village. He doesn't need training, but he just wants to make sure that in fact his cousin Hinata, who he reveals had been injured during the attack, get the treatment she requires. Naruto would speak out of this being the first time he had heard of this. He would send his regards to Neji's cousin. Even though he and Hinata had been in the same class, he had very rarely interacted with her, as she was shy to basically everyone. Of course, there is no prior connection to Naruto and Hinata here, as she didn't have as big of a crush on the Genin. But, and vice versa, Naruto doesn't seem as bothered by Hinata's presence, as she was never around. Thus, he's very curious about
who or what she stands for, since the only real interaction he had ever had to do with Hinata was when he beat the ever-living crap out of Neji. Neji was obviously humbled, but Naruto himself does not know why he did this, and because of retribution, he would let Neji come along. Thus, the Konoha 9, as we could call them, would set out along with Jiraiya. Of course, some of them do want to be trained by the Sannin, but the Sannin doesn't exactly know how to train every individual. At this point, someone probably like Shikamaru would make remarks on how this is such a drag, and probably Ino beating him in the side of the head like she always does to enforce her will. As the group of genin accompanying Jiraiya approached their first town, Jiraiya would make them come to a halt. He would start passing out these odd-looking small square papers to each genin, with Neji refusing his, as he's not here to train, but to make sure Tsunade comes back to the village safe. Jiraiya at first would not question the boy's motives, as he would go on to give a full-out explanation of this in fact being chakra paper. He would explain that the effects of chakra paper is to accurately depict the chakra nature within the 5 core natures and not one of the outer natures, giving him enough information to at least thoroughly train each individual in some form of jutsu that is not based on or out of the current state of jutsu, being ningen or taijutsu, that they're usually equated to. His reasoning for this is, what if you were to go up against someone from your own clan? Well, then you'd have a couple of things up your sleeve, no? He would then proceed to teach each and every one individually how to channel chakra into the paper, as the listing would go as follow. Ino would be revealed to have earth and water, whilst Choji and Shikamaru would be revealed to both have earth and fire. Shino would share this earth and fire, whilst Kiba only has earth. Tenten canonically was not revealed to having any chakra natures, looking like Kishimoto really did forget about her, but in this case we will be giving her lightning release. On the other hand, Neji does have a chakra nature that had been confirmed, but up until we actually use him, we will not be revealing that. So, to go forward, Jiraiya would start off with the users of Earth Release, as this is a pretty simple one to work with. As we saw in the War Arc, even if one does not have a strong affinity for Earth, the Jutsu Earth Wall is still at least simple enough for those to learn. So, and vice versa, our beginners would be using this same Jutsu to make a segue into using Earth Release. Thus, he would then move on to some other people, which in this case is only Naruto and Tenten, since Naruto has both lightning and wind release, and Tenten consists of lightning release in this canonical version, or in this version's canonicity. We could see Jiraiya probably teaching them one of the most simple lightning jutsu that would probably be known to them. Of course, Jiraiya himself makes no use of lightning style, but since in this version and in the previous, he had some connection to Minato, or at least in teaching Minato, so at the very least would have witnessed lightning release being used. So, in this case, I think starting them off with a simple jutsu in Lightning Arc would be more than enough. So, to go over the progress, we see Neji training off on his own, improving his Jugen stance as he always does, while the people that had been going through Earth Release had pretty much got it down. They had been able to do everything from a small to a combined large Earth Wall, which would get Jiraiya to want to do it further, or at least teach them some further things. In this case, he's going to get more specific individually, as he doesn't want them all learning the same thing copy-paste. So he can instead teach them all something individually, and then they could help each other to discover all these collectively. So, starting with Ino, he would probably teach her some sort of dome technique, similar to how Gara's sand domes / sphere works, to where one could protect oneself within an inner shell. Moving on to Choji, something like an offensive jutsu that would work similar to Sakura's punch in Shippuden would be taught, we're using an output force of earth energy and impulsing it into the ground, it could cause a giant tremor, shooting things like spikes out of the ground, working much more similar to how the wood spikes of Yamato do. Shikamaru, on the other hand, would be an odd case, as he could make use of both defensive and offensive jutsu. So, in this case, Jiraiya will be teaching the first offensive earth jutsu to Shikamaru and Shino. Shikamaru would be taught the jutsu Earth Bullet, which has a wind, fire, and water counterpart, and assumably one of lightning as well. Whilst Shino, on the other hand, would be taught the actual Earth Spike Jutsu, unlike Choji, which has a variant of it. Thus, if they later both master these techniques and come together, they could probably create a unique group jutsu. Kiba, on the other hand, is a special case, as even though his clan jutsu is made for moving around, Jiraiya will not be teaching him that form of jutsu, but instead one that completely opposes it, one that nullifies motion in the headhunter jutsu, earlier seen to be used by Kakashi himself. Thus, Kiba would be more than ecstatic to learn it after finding this out from Naruto. Returning to Naruto and Tenten, I actually see Tenten learning the lightning arc before Naruto, as Naruto had been unconsciously using lightning and wind together, and thus somewhat messing up the jutsu each individual time. So, Tenten would do her best to help Naruto, but this wouldn't work as much. This is when Naruto would have an idea of his own. Similar to how he had been channeling both, he would try and make them individual by channeling them into separate hands. Maybe creating two different Rasengans, destabilizing both or destabilizing both, most likely by channeling wind chakra to one end and lightning to another. If he could get used to this, even though the Rasengans would not actually change or probably just blow up in his face, he could at least learn how to split off his chakra. And for the most part, this would succeed. Jiraiya would obviously question why Naruto is trying to channel not only two Rasengans simultaneously, since that seems pretty easy to him, but why he's trying to channel two different chakra natures simultaneously. Naruto would explain his methods and would actually come out to succeed. Each time he would reach splitting the two natures apart and channeling them into chakra or into his Rasengan chakra, they would seem to either disperse, cutting himself, or the other disperse and end in kind of an explosion. So this is how Naruto gets it down, but don't think it will be that easy. This obviously happens over the span of most likely 2 weeks, with every person individually learning something new. Naruto would obviously be working on trying to get the lightning arc down still, while Tenten would probably move on to learning how to channel nature energy into her individual jutsu. This is where something even more interesting would happen. Jiraiya would make note of Ino having water release, while Choji and Shikamaru have fire. So he would take the individual time of teaching Shikamaru something like similar to the Flower Phoenix Jutsu, or maybe a Fire Bullet type of technique, while teaching Choji the more traditional Fireball / Great Fireball, and taking it way out of proportion, he would teach Ino the Toad Oil techniques. Unlike how most people might think, the Toad Oil techniques are not actually connected to nature energy in any way, shape, or form. Thus, she should be able to learn it, not within these 2 weeks, but the bare basics, and maybe get a few close calls. And thus, this would probably be all that he actually teaches them throughout the span of this training trip. Yet, on the other hand, I do see Jiraiya within the last week getting through to Neji and discovering his fire nature, which was revealed in our data books. On the other hand, after this would occur, Jiraiya would actually teach Neji some form of chakra channeling, similar to how he did Tenten. Since Neji and all Hyugas have a naturally high sense of chakra control, he is able to teach him fire release pretty easily, and at that, the way to channel it into his hands. Neji is the only person that, instead of learning something outside of his usual clan jutsu, is actually learning something that could improve his clan jutsu. But, by warning of Jiraiya, Neji would know to keep this secret, since Hiyashi and other nobles would probably not take kindly to this. Tenten, who had also at this point probably gotten down how to channel chakra throughout items, would most likely start bothering Naruto, giving him tidbits of information on what she was doing, maybe giving him an idea too. Instead of following the shape of the Rasengan like Tenten follows that of the weapon, he should actually be following the shape of the energy he is trying to expel. He has no time to test this though, as they would finally come across yet another town suspected of Tsunade living there. So, whilst the rest of his team would stay behind in the forest, probably camping out to continue their training, him and Jiraiya would head inside of this town to find Tsunade.
So now we resume this what if. A little bit after all of, I guess Jiraiya has, kind of taught everyone their new techniques, like, learning more oil techniques, since they don't really have much derivative from, nature and nature release, to be more specific. And she'd be able to do these techniques. When it came to Choji and Neji, they had gotten fire release. Obviously, got water release, and some others got their own affinities. So, now we continue this what if. So, I get all of Konoha 12, and that includes Naruto too. So whenever I mention Konoha 12, I guess try to remember that I don't have to say and Naruto too. So since he's a part of Konoha 12. Random tangent, but I thought I might have, or I should have added that too. So once they continue their journey to find Tsunade, they would come upon a small town in which Jiraiya had found a nearby bathhouse where he could possibly get research. So having to find hotel room for 12 kids is quite interesting, but it is doable with the salary of Asani, right? So he would pay for I believe it would be 6 rooms, if I'm not wrong, right? In the normal hotel room, right? You'd have at least 1-2 beds, and it would actually make sense. I don't even know why I'm going into details of a hotel room, but hey, I'd say 6. Okay, that seems reasonable. So they'd all be settled in, right? And, they're kind of resting from their journey and getting ready to go further. As Naruto and, obviously, are in their own room. And they're just, chilling. I don't know what else to say there. I mean, they were traveling. They only have one thing to do. So then they would hear a knock at the door. Now, what would happen is Naruto could, in a sense, for some reason, feel little chakra from the other side of the door, since the people on the other side of the door, or the 2 individuals on the other side of the door, wouldn't be outputting so much of their chakra. So it'd be kind of faint for Naruto to feel. But Neji from the other room and some other chakra sense are really people who are excellent at sensing chakra would be able to feel this, and it would feel as if it was just a normal person, right? Since no one is really outputting that much, I was about to say Ryatsu, chakra. And so Naruto would open the door, and he would see someone who had a very similar appearance to that of Sasuke, but older per se. As then he would really look, as he couldn't get his mind on it. Who was this person? As then he would look to his left, and he would see this guy who had features of a shark, and he was kind of a little confused. As Itachi would tell Naruto that he is coming with them, due to him being the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. As before he could say anything, he would just suddenly go blank, as had used her clan technique and was controlling Itachi's body, as she would go to kind of withdraw her kunai to stab Kisame, or at least do something against him, right? Well, it's still in the Ino and the rest of Konoha 12 are in the element of surprise. But right before she could do anything, obviously, as we know, Ino has very much trouble putting Uchihas in clan techniques, right? Like Madara, for example, and Obito and Itachi. So Itachi would manage to honestly break out of it. I don't know why I said honestly, but he'd be able to break out of it, seeing he's about to stab Kisame. Obviously, he would take it back and take back control per se, and also stop himself from stabbing Kisame. And this would give Naruto, I guess, a similar time or a pretty easy time to in a way passively. I don't want to say passively activate, but kind of amp his speeds up in a way. As you know, in the other parts, it's stated by Mista that I believe it's in the first part or the second. Naruto realized when training for water walking, he can instinctively turn off whenever he's weightless, right? And that sort of comes into factor of his passive ability. It's not always outputting, speed. Sometimes it's lowered to a small factor in which it wouldn't be outputting so much speed, right? It'd just be that of a normal person. So he had a few seconds to output his speed to the max via his swift release, as he'd be able to punch, Itachi in the stomach or in the gut, whatever terms you would like to use. As then this would send Itachi sliding back on the floor. He'd grab a grip of himself and slide back in the hallway. As they would then go outside the hallway and prepare to fight. But right before Kisame would unsheath his Samihade, he'd be caught in a shadow paralysis jutsu. This from our boy Shikamaru. And all the other Konoha 12 would then be on the scene. Now with this overwhelming numbers being 6 times their own, there's 12, so simple math, right? 6 times 2. Alright, I don't really have to explain, but pretty much Lee comes out, and the other members, even though Lee is sort of injured per se, he could still, I guess, make it. So they're pretty much fighting, sort of losing battle, but their only advantage is obviously they're S-rank criminals. They have way more experience, more jutsu capabilities, and obviously Itachi has his Sharingan. He could put probably most of them in Genjutsus except Naruto. That's if the Nine Tails decides to intervene. It'll be an interesting way to see if Itachi could put Neji in a Genjutsu, but we're not really going to go over that as we now continue this, right? So Ten will then use her lightning arc and throw it at Itachi. Itachi would then sort of, in a way, use simple Susanoo, not really Susanoo per se, but the aura of his Susanoo would kind of defend him. It was like a small skeleton per se, right? And obviously this would kind of be taxing to him. And the reason why he didn't just body flicker or move out the way is they're in a pretty small hallway, right? And I guess in a way it would be really hard for him to dodge, even though he is Itachi Uchiha, right? But as we know, lightning, when you use lightning-based abilities, it enhances your speed, right? This is kind of be a little hard for Itachi to dodge, and also the fact that I'm trying to actually have some characters at least have some sort of winning chance against Itachi and Kisame, right? So, yeah. And, would then see this and try to use her water style. Even though water and lightning don't go together, it would be good for her, right? It's not really hurting her per se, but it's going towards Itachi, right? What if she had used the water as a conductor for the lightning, thus, I guess, magnifying its effect, right? And this would be even this would give Itachi more of a reason, right? This would widen the range of the lightning arc, and it would give Itachi more of a reason to use Susanoo. So it's plausible per se. It's I'm explaining why I should do things and what if I probably shouldn't do that. But now they would be getting right before they would get into the real battle. Obviously, Sasuke would then appear, right? He would then see his brother and become enraged, right? Before he would use his Chidori. And if you're wondering, wasn't Sasuke restrained? And yes, you would be correct. And you were wondering, for example, right? So the ninjas in the hallway outside of his room were talking of Itachi Uchiha's presence, right? He had came into the village, put Kakashi into a coma with just a few hours he was there. So there was definitely a lot of talk, and Sasuke could clearly hear this, right? And obviously, Sakura visits him every day, giving him like news of like what's going on in like the real world. It's just, I guess that seems plausible per se. And obviously, Sasuke would break out their restraints. There weren't like ceiling tags, like Jiraiya level ceiling tags, right? Or Uzumaki ceiling tags, right? No, I mean, they were pretty simple, right? Because even though Sasuke did try to hurt like Gara constantly, Gara is much healthier now, and he's not really in the hospital, so that takes away Sasuke's reason per se to like kill Gara if he's not even there. So he would break out of his restraints, and he would go for the Itachi where he was last seen, and obviously he knows he's going after Naruto because he just has a feeling in his gut per se. Whatever feeling drove him to go to Naruto's hotel room that's same in canon pretty much, right? So what would happen is once he would get there, we would go back to the original perspective. He'd be trying to jab Itachi with a Chidori, in which he would pretty much catch his wrist and just snap it pretty much. It was pretty easy for him. And he would put Sasuke into a Tsukiyomi and kind of in a way just mentally fuck him, right? So after he would do this, he would then go back to like fighting, or was allowed to go back to capturing Naruto until Jiraiya of the Sannin appeared, as he had used his toad mouth jutsu and trapped the Akatsuki members inside, or he thought he did, as they would run the other way. They did not want to fight a Sannin member today. Maybe a few years from now, but definitely not today. So obviously Itachi would use Amaterasu and escape the same way. Now Neji and Choji, they'd be looking at the fire, the type of fire, and they'd be amazed because number one, they're like basically fire users now, right? They see Itachi, someone who used this black flame, and they feel as if this flame was way hotter than any normal flame. It's kind of like a common sense thing, right? They assume it's hotter because it burned through Jiraiya's toad mouth jutsu. Imagine the amount of chakra they thought he put in, and to just burn right through that, it's kind of something to put someone in a daze, overthink. They would like have one overthink about how powerful Itachi was, right? And yeah, I don't know why I had like a small discussion about this, like about like Neji and Choji seeing it, but like since they're fire users, they could take some, I guess, inspiration per se, on how to like do better fire jutsus. I know that kind of sounds in paper form stupid, but it is pretty impactful on the plot. So after the failed capture attempt on Naruto, they would continue their travels until they would make it to the town of Tsunade. As what would happen is they would kind of spend the rest of the day, since like they would spend the night at the hotel, right? Then in the morning they would spend the whole day walking to that town, right? And once they would get there, they'd be famished, right? They're also kind of hungry, and they had found a nearby bar, and they were all pretty much going to eat dinner, right? They're planning to have kind of a loosen up, I guess, and have fun per se, I guess. And they would walk into the bar, and they're looking for a table to sit at, right? And they would see none other than Tsunade, or at least Jiraiya would see Tsunade, and they would recognize each other, and they would all sit down while the other, like it would be Naruto and Jiraiya, like sitting at the table, right? And the others just found other tables to sit at, right? Makes sense, because he wouldn't have 12 people, sitting at a table. Just doesn't work out. It would have to be one big table, or one big chair. I don't know. Never mind. And they would start to converse, right? Kind of catching up. As Jiraiya would get to the topic, they were here to convince Tsunade to come back to the position of Hokage, possibly, or at least think about it. And also, they requested her healing services. As Tsunade would ask, who needs to be healed? I heard the chief of the hospital was actually pretty good. As then, obviously, Jiraiya would explain Lee's leg injuries, as obviously earlier I had explained how Lee was there. He still had a bit of injuries, but he had, persevered. That was the word. And he had came along with them. Obviously, he can't really fight at his full power, or even, I don't think he can even open the gates. As Jiraiya would explain, Lee's legs were broken from Gara, and also the after effects of using the 8 gates. As Tsunade would recognize the technique and ask how many gates he had went into, in which he would respond saying only 5, and he had opened the 6th before he was interrupted by his opponent. As she would kind of become a little worried, but then she would then say, what's in it for me if I come back? As Jiraiya would then say, well, the Hashirama wouldn't be as disappointed in you in the afterlife. As obviously then he would kind of point at Naruto. Then he would then say, doesn't Naruto ever remind you of your brother, or like your little brother? As obviously Tsunade just met the guy, and pretty much Jiraiya kind of, in a sense, mentions how he's similar to Naruto in his goal, right, to become Hokage, right? And obviously, he's not going to say, like, he's Minato's son, like, right then and there. It wouldn't really make sense. They were probably going to say that in private, but obviously, she would kind of be surprised, right? Because she really haven't, even though the goal of Hokage is pretty popular, she herself being kind of not in exile, but in isolation from everyone in the Leaf Village, hadn't really seen a boy who had such ambition, because obviously she had recognized a boy, Naruto, from like his hair and shit. It looked really familiar to that of Minato, and his personality, his flamboyant personality, was similar to that of Kushina's, which really hard to figure. If you see Kushina and you see her like get all angry and shit, like, it's really hard to forget. But obviously she would then, I guess, tell Naruto to in a sense spar her, to like, because what I'm trying to say here is, if Jiraiya is so trusted in this boy and actually thinks he can be Hokage, she wants to see for herself how strong Naruto is. In which they would go outside and they would have their fight, right? Naruto would use his swift clones, his clones, anything he can get an advantage, right? He would summon his clones, as Tsunade would recognize this from Minato, right? As then she would say, using swift clones to try to electrify me, right? That doesn't work. As then she would pour chakra around her body, kind of reinforcing it. And since Naruto, even though he does have large pools of chakra, he would not really be able to bypass, at that point, his clones would not be able to bypass her chakra, right? Her chakra armor, I guess you can say, per se. I don't know why I said per se. I said say and then say per se. Never mind. So obviously they would try to use the effect of the swift clone on Tsunade, in which it wouldn't. She had already been way too adapted to Minato's swift clone, in which she would then throw a punch, kind of destroying all of the clones via kick or punch or sweep kick, whatever you want to think, right? She would, because there's multiple of them, it would probably be way too much detail to go on each action to defeat each one of the clones, right? So she would then wait for Naruto to attack, right? She wasn't impatient. She was a Sonic, right? She at least had some battle IQ, right? So Naruto was kind of thinking the same, but he realized Tsunade wasn't going to move. And he realized he wanted to try technique. She was the healing Sonic. After all, she should be able to heal herself after this. As then, he would then raise his hand into the air, forming a Rasengan. As then, he would summon a clone, right? as a clone pour lightning energy into it, creating a sort of imperfect version of what would be, I guess, a lightning manipulated Rasengan, right? I haven't really got a name to it. Who knows, maybe might still give it a name, hopefully. As there would be sort of lightning sparks off the Rasengan as Naruto would go to, slam it into Tsunade's stomach. As it would make contact. But something was weird. After the explosion and debris, Tsunade had gotten up, almost as if nothing had happened. As there was some weird seal on her forehead, this being the, I guess, the 100 healing seal. I don't know why I said I guess. It is the 100 healing seal. As Naruto would be like, he'd kind of be shocked, like, what is that? As Jiraiya would kind of be like eating popcorn, not really eating popcorn, it's metaphorical, but he's really liking the fight so far. Naruto used he added lightning chakra to this Rasengan, and he had more development than even him and Minato, right? Or at least at this point. As then he was even more surprised. Tsunade had to use her 100 heals, but it was only brief as she had then turned it off. As now, Tsunade was impressed. And obviously, she would then say that she, will go. This would lead to, obviously, her drugging Jiraiya, as then she would go to meet Orochimaru. She was impressed by the kid, and when she looked at it, she did break the agreement, not the agreement, but her word, per se, and still went, obviously. The next day, Jiraiya would then say how she, obviously how Tsunade had drugged him, just like she always used to, and then he would say, my chakra isn't working. It's sort of nullified, not completely nullified, only, I guess, in a sense, limiting to the point where you only had enough chakra to live. So obviously, the Konoha 12 and Jiraiya would head over to the location after Shizune had told them the location, right? They would all go. Now, they have 15 people. Like, if I'm counting everyone, they have 15 people, and they're going to fight 2 people. Look at the numbers. They now have an advantage, which is better than they did in canon, because in canon, it was a sort of 3v2. Now they have a huger advantage. With all the mixing elements, there's definitely some interesting plays at hand. So, once they would make it to the scene, they would see Tsunade and hole through the wall, as she was ready. She was fighting Orochimaru. As then Shizune would jump in, fight Kabuto. Ultimately, that would result to her losing. As then they would go into the summoning battle, in which Jiraiya wouldn't be able to summon, Gamabunta, in which he'd be like, Naruto, you gotta summon it. As Naruto, having way more chakra control than his canonical self, would be able to summon Gamabunta. I don't really see a problem here, because he already summoned a toad before. Not Gamabunta. I actually forgot his name. I think it was a toad with the shield and, the spear, but I may be wrong. I don't know his specific name, but this specific toad was the one who transformed into Kurama with the help of Naruto and defeated Shikaku. So Naruto should be able to summon Gamabunta, and obviously with the advice of Jiraiya, telling him to summon Gamabunta, he would. Obviously, the Toad Chief would be summoned, as then he would look at Manda. As, without any words, he had unsheathed his katana, or his sword, or his wakizashi, and he was ready to fight. There was no word said. He just unsheathed his sword, and he was ready. And all the Konoha 12s would either focus their elemental attacks, kind of combining them with the Toad being, using her oil attacks, kind of combining them with Neji and Choji's fireballs, or Great Fireball Jutsu, with Jiraiya's flame bomb. I think it's flame bomb jutsu, and mixing all this together would create a huge flame, which would embody Manda, right? Kind of burning him, or I don't really know the gender of Manda, I assume. Never mind. It would burn Manda, right? Kind of desummoning Manda. As down in the ground, Naruto would be fighting, Kabuto with the help of, obviously, Shizune, even though she was a bit injured. He'd be fighting her, hand to hand. And until, Kabuto starts shutting off his chakra networks using, not his chakra networks, but his pressure points, right? He's very knowledgeable in that aspect, right? And then, obviously, Naruto wouldn't really try to hold Rasengan constantly. I'd feel like he'd just try a few lightning arcs first, shadow clones, swift clones. He'd be trying variations of each jutsu, right? Not just solely relying on using a Rasengan. As he would summon about 10 swift clones to distract them, as then he would throw a smoke bomb he had gotten from his pouch, and he would then get behind Kabuto. But when Kabuto reacted, this was a clone. And once he had stabbed the clone, he had gotten electrified, as Naruto would then appear in front of him out of the smoke and slam the Rasengan into his stomach. I guess, in this way, incapacitating Kabuto, right? So after Naruto had did this, that would be the end of Kabuto for now, right? Orochimaru would get folded by, some of the Konoha 12 and Jiraiya, and he would be forced to retreat with Kabuto, as this would be the end of the Tsunade retrieval arc. Once the team had gotten back to the village, and Tsunade had done the surgery to bring Lee's legs back into order, per se, she kind of went into training by Hiruzen to sort of, in a sense, succeed her in a way. As then she'd kind of be learning to become the 5th Hokage, as now we worry about Sasuke. Sasuke had seen everyone come back to the village, and he had grown jealous. With all the effects from the seal, and obviously the seal that Kakashi put on him, negative emotions enhanced the curse mark and weakened the seal. The weaker his will is to get stronger on a positive way, rather than go down his path of revenge in a negative way, will affect the way the seal will defend against the curse mark. In this case, it would weaken at the curse mark, and the curse mark would start to eat at Sasuke. As then, when the Sound Ninja had attacked him and offered Sasuke a place in Orochimaru's regime, per se, he would refuse at first, but then with some manipulated words from the Sound 4, they would convince him to join, in which he'd be put in a small tomb casket, after packing his things up and telling Sakura the same thing he did in canon. As obviously he was sealed in this, I don't know how you would name it, but it had pretty much killed him, so he can activate the second stage of the curse mark, right? And during this time, it was probably a few hours into the morning, in which Sakura would then tell Naruto that Sasuke has went rogue, in which this would be sort of a shocking scene. Not really in this what if, because it's not really visualized, and I'm not... it would be really hard for me to visualize that, or at least tell you it, in a sense, because you already had that shocking feeling, unless you didn't watch Naruto, in which you really should. And the tangents, I probably shouldn't continue them, as obviously the Konoha 12 would continue to the office, right? As once he would get there, he would see that Shikamaru had become tuning, and was doing quite well with it. And obviously Naruto was very happy for his friend, and then they would go in and hear the mission, right? The details, right? So Tsunade would tell Naruto that, and the rest of Konoha 12, that some of the Jonin had left the village due to destruction caused by the attack. They had needed to go out and do missions to bring in revenue for the village and bring their status up, to make it sound like they weren't weak to the other villages, which would lead to attack. Now Tsunade would tell Naruto that they're the only team in the village that are suited enough to go on this mission. As she would authorize the mission, they would all get ready, and they would then leave the village. They'd be on the Sound Force trail with obviously the bug, Shino and Hinata had worked together to track Sasuke's chakra point, or at least his general direction. Also, with the help of 2 Hyugas, they'd be able to do it just fine. So, the Konoha 12 would go off on their mission, as most of it would go relatively the same. Like Shikamaru versus Kin, I believe. Oh my god. I can't really pronounce her name, but I know it, man. I just don't want to butcher it. But when it came to most of their fights, due to the introduction of their, I guess, small mastery over some of their elements, they would have a sort of interesting advantage. But most of them would go relatively the same. Will Choji be forced to use his clan's pills to get a boost in strength? Yes. I know that kind of sounds bad, right? I mean, in his recent development with Jiraiya, like, the point is he's supposed to get strong enough where he's not going to have to do that. But in this, it would seem like you have to, since Jibando is a pretty strong character. I mean, strong, he's like high tuning level, I'd say. At the most, low joning. And obviously, all the Sound Force together would be joning level, right? And all these kids, or not kids, all of Konoha 12 are going to fight them, right? Which would be kind of a challenge. So when it came to Naruto versus Kimimaro, he was having a bit of trouble because Kimimaro is actually pretty strong without the effects of his illness. And he was going to be Orochimaru's next vessel, but due to the illness, it had kind of stopped that. But Naruto's Swift clones, his Rasengan, his Lightning Arc, his Gale Palms, and his other wind and possibly lightning techniques would be in use here. So it would kind of put them relatively equal, right? And with Gara and Lee coming in, or Drunk Lee coming in, who would be more stronger after the surgery, he'd be able to, I guess, be defeated. And of course, Kimimara's illness in the end got the upper hand on him and ended him. Once Naruto had practically got through to Sasuke, they would have a relatively, I guess, similar battle, right? I mean, Naruto's throwing hands, using swift clones, and now Sasuke realizes that base Naruto with no jutsu at all was equal to base Lee, who didn't have any gates, in which he realized he was going to lose, right? But would Naruto really go and resort to using the Nine Tails chakra? I'd say yeah, right? When you get a Chidori put through your lung, I don't see what Swift Release is gonna do to help you. I mean, maybe before the hand you can dodge it, but at that point, using a Chidori would be, I'd say, too fast for Naruto's perception. Because Naruto and Sasuke didn't have that rooftop battle, so Naruto doesn't know what the Chidori is per se. So Sasuke would use a Chidori on him. Naruto's Kurama Chakra would then seep out of his body into the one-tail form, and he would feel just rage through his veins, right? This would become a one-sided battle until Sasuke is forced to awaken his 3-to-1 Sharingan due to the intense fight, right? He's forced to adapt and evolve. Then what would occur next is Naruto would go to the Two Tails, and they would start evolving and fighting, right? Until it came to the final clash. Naruto's lightning-infused Rasengan with Sasuke's Chidori, it was sort of like a Vermilion Rasengan, and then the curse mark-infused, Chidori. Obviously, Sasuke had went into stage 2, giving him a 20 times the multiplier. With his recently activated 3-to-1 Sharingan, it was very hard for someone like Naruto, only in the Two Tails form, to keep up. So now their attacks would clash, as Naruto's attack was actually winning in a sense. It was overpowering the Chidori. But Naruto's senses had come back, and he realized he could possibly kill Sasuke, and that isn't the mission. So he had purposely lowered the power or the output as kind of giving Sasuke the overpowering win. But he wasn't as, I guess, per se, injured as Canon, right? No Chidori through the lung. It would, like, the injury, right? It wouldn't be as severe because of Kurama's high speed factor. After the clash, Sasuke stands over his body, or not his body, like headband, as then he would drop the headband, and then he would go about to Orochimaru's cave. As then a few minutes later, Kakashi would come onto the scene with Ino and the others, kind of having a sort of emotional scene per se, because like everyone pretty much thought he died, or at least was on the brink of death. So like Kakashi's rushing back to bring him to the hospital. But then once everything went down, they realized most of Kurama's chakra, or like Jiraiya and the higher ups, people who had more knowledge on the Nine Tails, they realized the Nine Tails chakra had kind of saved Naruto. And which just would mark the end of the Sasuke retrieval arc. As now we go over the time skip. And on this time skip, I will be having a Jonin exams, and not just right after, right? And obviously Naruto, in a sense, would be going with Jiraiya, but it wouldn't be as long. It wouldn't be 3 years. It'd be like 1 year and a half, right? He would be, I guess, 14 or almost 14, and once he had come back, he'd be like 15, right? That'd be about right. And once he had come back, he had, I guess, gained mastery over lightning and wind, and those are the requirements to be a Jonin, the basic requirements, having 2 masteries over lightning and wind. And obviously later on in this time skip, Naruto will possibly learn a lightning manipulation to that. That's if Mysta does it. But in my opinion, I would do it, but it's not really my choice per se. So once they would get back in town per se, they would have the Jonin exams. And luckily, this portion of the Jonin exams wouldn't be solely based on having 3 people in your, I guess, squad, right? And the people who will be doing the Jonin exams is Naruto, Neji, and Shikamaru. These are the people I see more fit for Jonin at this time. Lee could really be Jonin, but I'd say like after the time skip, or at least a little, like maybe after the Pain invasion, or the Kakazu and Hidan missions, like kill him. As once they would be called into the office, they'd be met by other Jonin, possibly Hayate, Kakashi, the 2 gate guards, Kotetsu and I can't remember their names. I think it's the 2 gate guards. I'm just gonna call them the 2 gate guards. And they're actually pretty strong. Like, they're pretty underrated. And also the other Jonin and Proctor that had like glasses and with red shades or something like that. I can't really remember his name either, but mostly just the Jonins, right? It would be sort of like the Gote 13 evaluation, right? They'd evaluate them, put small tests, right, to evaluate their chakra levels and I guess the chakra control and the output, right? Obviously, they do a few spars, like, which I don't mind going over right now. I'll be doing Naruto versus Kakashi. I don't know why I said I don't mind. I planned on doing it. But now we're going to be doing some of these spars, right? Shikamaru will be going against Asuma. Neji will be going against Guy. And Naruto will be going against Kakashi. This seemed more appropriate since these are the people who had been monitoring these people who are up for Jonin promotion. So it would be best for them to be fighting those people, right? Kakashi, Guy, and Asuma. So they'd be in a training field, as the other Jonin would be kind of witnessing, other than the Jonin that are watching like the other fights, right? And they'd watch, as obviously, Hayate would do the start, as then Naruto would, usually he'd wait to attack, right? But now, sort of, Kakashi knows he's patient, right? In a way, he's patient. He has definitely changed, and Mysta said it himself. After the Tsunade retrieval arc, Naruto's not gonna be the same. And this is why, specifically. He became more logical in a way, and learn to evaluate the fight before attacking. Naruto would then make a few clones and use the classic smoke bomb to clear the area. Why did I say Sasuke? As Kakashi would then be forced to use his Sharingan, right, to see through, at least try to see through the smoke. But this smoke bomb wasn't really the normal smoke bomb we know and see in the show. This is a smoke bomb that has elements of mist. And yes, the mist from a hidden mist jutsu. Obviously, Naruto had somehow gotten his hands, or at least hold, I guess the fundamentals on how to do a hidden mist jutsu. Obviously, she has the capability. She's a water user, right? Then he would trap all the mist inside this smoke bomb and possibly use it later as some sort of invention. And honestly, this would kind of magnify the relationship between Ino and Naruto, not just like that, but like as a ninja, right? Being able to make inventions like based on each other's elements, it makes sense. So Naruto would throw down the sort of mist bomb at this point, as Kakashi cannot see through, right? Because it's based on the hidden mist jutsu, right? Which Kakashi had trouble seeing past when he had fought Zabuza and they landed a Waves arc. So Naruto then appears behind, Kakashi and uses his, that was pretty much a Swift clone, right? As then it would turn into electricity, as it would then, electrify Kakashi. Kakashi would kind of stumble, right? He had grown adapted to the feeling of lightning, right? As though he still got hit, right? He was a little burnt and I guess bruised, but he was still on his feet. Naruto would then go through a few hand signs before using the lightning arc, as he would throw it at Kakashi. Kakashi would then burst, as that was a clone. It was an explosive clone, right? As then Naruto would feel something tug at his feet, right? And he'd be pulled down. But Naruto would then kind of, in a sense, he wouldn't be pulled all the way, right? He'd be pulled a little bit in, and as then Kakashi would come out the tree, as the clone who had used the headhunter jutsu, which was a clone, as Kakashi would then go through a few hand signs before apologizing. Not apologizing sincerely, but as a comedic thing, right? As then he would then use the fire-style fireball jutsu. As Naruto's feet are trapped in, he can't really do anything, or at least it seems like that, right? We wonder, what is Naruto gonna do? So what Naruto does is he quickly substitutes, right, as obviously sort of inhaling wind, right, as he would then kind of inhale it near some, obviously, right, Kakashi had used the headhunter jutsu, creating some sort of dust, right, with Naruto taking advantage of this to create sort of like a diversion with his, like, kind of blinding Kakashi. Naruto would then substitute to seem as if he was still there, and once the fire had been in effect with the wind supporting it subtly, once it would then the flames would then disappear, there would be a just burnt log of wood, as Naruto would then be behind Kakashi with a kunai at his neck, saying, "I guess you lose," as this is sort of the end of the proctor exam, the exam, a sparring exam against Kakashi, as Naruto had proved himself worthy. And this will be where I'm leaving off my part. I'd say, but Neji and Shikamaru proved themselves worthy against Asuma and Guy, as they'd be able to get their promotion to Shonin. Continuing the time skip, Naruto would obviously continue to get a feel for his swift release and try mastering the Rasengan, learning the giant Rasengan, or the Odama Rasengan.
But that's going to mark an end for movie 1 of What If Naruto Had Swift Release. If y'all want to see this series continue, get this movie to 2,000 comments and 1,000 likes, and we will happily continue it past this point. There might obviously be some delay due to scripting reasons, and the second part would be released as a full movie and not a separate series. And yeah, along with that, I would like to thank every single person that tuned into this. And if you don't want to miss the next part of this releasing, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification. Along with that coming to an end, I would like to raise some awareness for the increasing suicide rates, not only in certain countries, but around the world. And if you or any of your loved ones are considering harming yourself or others, please consider contacting this hotline. It is the suicide hotline. So don't do anything stupid or drastic, but instead report here. And with that being said, this has been sixmysta. Peace.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
Subscribe for more.
Yada yada does it.